It all starts with Wolfgang, the last living barbarian, facing over 78,000 demons all at once. However, during the battle, he ends up getting struck by a body-binding spell. Right after that, the monsters cast a silent spell to prevent any scream of agony from escaping his throat. They also use weakness and curse spells to strip away all his defenses and drastically reduce his physical abilities. To make matters even worse, an amputation spell is cast with the sole purpose of severing every single limb from the warrior's body. Finally, the high-ranking demons cast the ultimate instant-ending curse to finish off the hero's life for good. Seeing that the MC is unconscious, the demon leader approaches and glares at him with an arrogant look. However, Wolfgang refuses to accept his end so easily. The monster turns around in complete shock upon realizing that the warrior somehow survived all those lethal attacks. Wolfgang reveals that he can only fight the demons single-handedly because he made a contract with the angels and received special abilities from them. A demon in the form of a floating skull appears before him and calls him crazy and ignorant for challenging them like that. The hero just looks at the enemy dead seriously and asks why he is being called crazy and ignorant. The creature asks if it is wrong, questioning how any sane human would willingly choose to wage war against demons. Without giving an immediate answer, the warrior simply takes a firm step forward and prepares for battle. He leaps high into the air wielding his weapon and agrees that the monster's words actually make a lot of sense. Wolfgang admits he lost his sanity a long time ago, but points out that it was the demons themselves who drove him to this point. The number of enemies drops to just over 13,000, while the hero remembers that the abilities given by the angels were numerous. He explains that the celestial beings spared no effort to support him in this solitary war against the forces of darkness, and even if the demons chop off the MC's limbs, that would not stop him, because one of those abilities was ridiculously overpowered. The fallen angel Uriel granted him the power of rapid regeneration. Wolfgang explains that even if his limbs were completely severed, they would heal and go back to normal in an instant. He claims that even his head would grow back if it were chopped off. Thus, the immortal warrior begins to slaughter the monsters one by one, acting like a completely relentless force. At this point in the fight, the enemies begin to get terrified of the barbarian's power and start seriously questioning everything. They no longer know who the real monster is. But the hero warns them that regretting taking him on is completely useless. Now, by then, the number of demons had already dropped to a little over 10,000, and they were gathered at the sacred temple. That place was strategically chosen by the monsters to permanently cut off Wolfgang's divine connection with the angels. Even knowing full well that it was a setup, he decides to walk inside without showing the slightest hesitation. After all, this revenge was the main reason he accepted joining this holy war and making a pact with the celestial forces in the first place. In front of him finally appears the cursed monster who took the lives of his entire beloved family in the past. The scumbag was hiding right there, in the heart of that dark temple. The warrior quickly realizes that the plan to lure him to that sanctuary also came from the mind of that cowardly demon. Suddenly, a barrage of sharp arrows is fired in his direction in an attempt to bring him down fast. He is hit directly in the chest by the arrows, which pierce his skin without him making any effort to dodge. The enemy's plan seems to work great as they manage to corner and hit the intruder successfully. Without the angel's blessing to help him inside, the opponent mocks him, saying he is nothing more than a helpless human. However, the demon forgot a very important detail, and Wolfgang smiles, saying he talks way too much for someone who is about to kick the bucket. The enemy leader gets completely furious at the provocation and calls him barbarian trash. He then orders all his forces to charge immediately to block and destroy the warrior once and for all. Wolfgang says they should have done that from the start, and begins to reveal the second reason why he is so powerful. The hero releases an overwhelming blue energy and proves that he has completely surpassed the limits of any ordinary human being. He has become a legendary combatant who grows stronger and stronger as he keeps facing new battles. He alone possesses the immense destructive power needed to wipe out an entire imperial army without needing any help. That devastating strength represents the true essence of a barbarian, and his strike reduces the number of enemies to a single survivor. The remaining leader is totally shocked to see his entire army completely wiped out by just one man. Tired of always hearing the same complaints from his opponents, the hero points his sword and warns that this is the end of the line. With the complete elimination of the monsters so close, he feels that his long journey of revenge is finally about to end. The warrior plans to return to his homeland in Germania, to rebuild the world that was ruined by that cursed race. He wishes to sail through dangerous seas, defeat monsters, and search for rare treasures, living freely as the barbarian of old once again. The remaining demon screams in rage that their race would never be eradicated by someone like the Barbarian. Right after, in a desperate move, he decides to end his own life before being caught. Wolfgang watches him coldly and asks if choosing to end things by his own hand makes him feel any better, as that will not change the fate of the demons. The warrior raises his great sword, stating that this self-inflicted end is not part of the conclusion he desires for his well-deserved revenge. But before the Barbarian can finish him off, the demon triggers an ancient spell of absolute petrification against him. A golden magic circle appears under Wolfgang's feet and begins turning his entire body into stone. The hero gets confused, not understanding what is happening to him at that moment. Meanwhile, the notifications show that Archangel Michael is confused, and the angel Hoshino looks with disgust at the demon's survival. The angel Manhwa is stunned by the curse, while Wolfgang realizes he has completely lost his senses and cannot hear a single sound. The Barbarian's vision begins to blur as he watches the enemy slowly retreat through the ruins. Desperate, he screams in his mind, demanding that the cursed demon not run away and leave him trapped there. Wolfgang swears he will still take him down to avenge his family, but his desperation is cut short when a young human appears, shouting in surprise. The young man is impressed in front of Wolfgang's stone statue, commenting that it looks amazingly realistic and lifelike. The Barbarian, still conscious inside the stone, is shocked to realize he can see the young man and hear his voice crystal clear. The tour guide gets the young man's attention, reminding him that no one should wander off during the cave tour. Right after they leave, the warrior's stone hand begins to move, indicating that the curse has finally worn off. Suddenly, the revived Barbarian grabs an unsuspecting young man's head from behind, startling the guy. Wolfgang looks coldly at the kid and orders him to get out of his way immediately. With a simple, rough movement, he throws the guy aside against the cave's stone wall. The other tourists go into full panic and start screaming desperately upon witnessing that act of violence. Ignoring the commotion, the warrior stretches his neck and pops his joints to regain his body's mobility. He complains in his thoughts about how that mysterious place is infested with extremely noisy humans. Now that he can finally move, he focuses on his goal of tracking down and hunting the cursed demon. To better understand his current situation, he decides to open his Divine System's status screen. However, upon looking at the information appearing on the floating screen, the warrior is completely taken aback. He widens his eyes, unable to believe the unusual numbers displayed before him. Wolfgang sees that the number of demons has mysteriously risen to nearly 1 million, which leaves him extremely confused. He also notices a completely unfamiliar term on the screen and wonders what on earth the word hunter means. To make matters worse, the list confirms that he remains the sole surviving barbarian in the entire world. He focuses his attention on his surroundings, realizing that something even stranger is happening right there at that moment. Several men wearing stylish suits appear out of nowhere around him through portals of light. Leaving the warrior intrigued, Wolfgang wonders if all that chaos and commotion happened just because he shoved a single kid roughly. He finds it ridiculous that a man falls injured from hitting a wall and others make such a huge scene over it. Considering everyone there weak, he is approached by a man named Kim Jin-seok, who introduces himself as a guard of the Black Dungeon. The guard displays his official badge and firmly demands that the barbarian present his civil identification immediately. The guard keeps demanding his hunter license, but Wolfgang loses his patience and grabs the man forcefully by the neck. The barbarian lifts the guard into the air effortlessly, leaving the other suited men terrified of such raw physical power. He asks if the guard really thought he was going to control him, warning that he will never submit to anyone. The choking man desperately begs for a second to try to de-escalate the tense situation. A red-haired woman comes running up, out of breath, asking if he is the famous warrior. Wolfgang surprised by her arrival, the barbarian drops the guard, who falls to the ground coughing and gasping for air. Wolfgang approaches the woman intimidatingly and demands to know how she found out his real name. The mood remains extremely tense while the young woman tries to stay calm in front of the imposing warrior. Trembling slightly out of fear from his powerful presence, she begins to stammer as she tries to answer the question. She introduces herself as Kang Yeren, a member of the Soul Hunters Association, and suggests they move to another spot to talk in private. Wolfgang considers rudely declining the invitation, but the loud sound of his own stomach growling with hunger stops him. Realizing the situation, Yeren gives a gentle smile and promises to provide plenty of food and a comfortable place for him to rest if he agrees to come with her. Without many better options at that moment, the barbarian decides to accept the offer and walks through the blue magic portal with her. Stepping out on the other side, he comes face to face with a modern city full of giant skyscrapers and realizes the world has changed drastically. Intrigued by all of it, the Barbarian asks what it means to be a hunter, and Yeren explains that they are warriors trained to battle monsters and demons from other worlds. Yeren explains that A-rank demons or higher are controlled by the government, while the association handles lower-ranked monsters. She adds that they have support to train new warriors, and that Wolfgang was part of this search project, taking the Barbarian by surprise. She shares that everyone thought he was just an ordinary statue, until they discovered he was actually a warrior turned to stone by a curse Wolfgang asks her to go on. And Yeren reveals that they are short on strong S-rank warriors to combat the growing invasion of demons coming through the portals. While going up in the glass elevator, the young woman admits she had a very important idea the moment she found him petrified in the cave. The Barbarian notices her sudden silence and wonders why she stopped talking halfway through. The girl looks away with a thoughtful and gloomy expression, keeping her thoughts to herself. Shortly after, the warrior leans his face close to an open box and sniffs that strange food with great curiosity. Sitting at a large table, Yeren explains that the food is called pizza and encourages him to eat, knowing he must be starving. While he eats, the young woman shares that they brought in several healers to break the petrification. Since it was an extremely powerful demonic curse, Wolfgang is amazed by the flavor of the pizza and praises the food immensely, surprised by those people's ability to create something so delicious. While chewing, he points to a bottle with a dark liquid on the table and asks what it is. She explains that it is a soft drink called cola and suggests he try it, as it tastes even better when paired with pizza. The Barbarian grabs the bottle and downs the dark liquid all at once without any ceremony. Yeren watches him closely and asks if he liked the drink, right after he coughs slightly from the carbonation. He admits it caught him off guard because the fizz burned his throat at first, but praises the drink for being very refreshing and tasty. Relieved and wiping the sweat from her neck, she is glad to have pleased the warrior's palate and asks him to keep eating. The girl takes the opportunity to ask if he has already noticed that the era he is in now is completely different from his own. Wolfgang confirms he has. As all the scenery he saw from inside that vehicle was totally alien to him, Yeren explains that they are currently in the 21st century and asks if he knows what year of the common era he lived in before being turned to stone. The Barbarian gets a confused expression and admits he has no idea what that abbreviation means. She tries to find another time reference, and he recalls that when he was born, people said 1,000 years had passed since the founding of Rome. Hearing this, the young woman jumps up from her chair super excited, exclaiming that her initial theory was totally spot on. She explains enthusiastically that he came straight from the Middle Ages to the 21st century. As an archaeologist hunter, she says she feels extremely fulfilled to have the chance to talk directly with someone from that time. Having no patience for that excitement, he says he does not understand anything she is talking about and demands they bring him more pizza. After devouring several whole boxes of pizza, the warrior finally leans back in his chair and says he is full. He changes the subject and asks if she knows where he can find the terrible demon called Devil House. Yeren gets confused by the name, and the Barbarian explains that it is the exact cursed monster that turned him into stone. She asks for a moment to look up the monster on a smartphone app, leaving the warrior intrigued by that weird technology. However, the search yields no results, and the young woman asks if he is sure that enemy is actually a monster. He confirms it is a demon, and that it was the last opponent he fought before ending up petrified for so long. The hero expresses his deep desire to defeat the villain and then return home to finally reunite with his beloved family. However, Yeren interrupts him with a serious look and warns that he needs to face reality, as Germania has long ceased to exist. Shocked by the news, he listens as the girl explains that over 1,000 years have passed and that those lands now belong to Norway. Wolfgang realizes with sadness that everything he knew and loved in the past has now turned into dust and records in history books. Overcome by a sudden wave of fury and frustration, he clenches his fist with immense force. In a moment of venting his pain, he throws a violent punch against the wall, destroying it completely. He mutters with determination and deep sorrow that he still needs to find a way to bring his beloved family back. Concerned about his emotional state, she tries to gently argue that the people from his time passed away a very long time ago. He insists he can bring them back because of his divine pact and demands that she help him find the demon no matter what. Understanding the severity of the situation, the young woman promises that if the enemy is still active in the world, she will definitely find him. Faced with the girl's promise to help, the barbarian finally calms down and agrees to work together with her. He acknowledges that she helped him because she had her own goal and assures her he will cooperate with her plans however necessary. The hero makes it clear that his single, simple condition is that she use all available resources to track down the demon walking down the hallway. Yaron explains that since he has no documents from this century, he will need to obtain a hunter license to operate freely. She says he already has all the qualifications to get registered, and Wolfgang comments on how complicated modern life is. While waiting near the black vehicle, the girl mentions that there are many great perks to becoming an official hunter. She explains that the perks include quality housing and an allowance, and the warrior asks if that benefit is paid in cash. Yaron reveals that passing the entrance exam guarantees a high cash reward, and with any luck, the valuable chance to forge a pact with the powerful constellations. Wolfgang asks what these constellations are, and Yaron explains that they are guardian deities of the stars. She adds that these deities favor talented individuals, watching over their steps and supporting their efforts without hesitation. The barbarian comments that he knows about angels, but constellations are news to him, to which the guide replies that they appeared only 15 years ago. Upon entering the packed gym, the warrior asks if everyone there wants to be a hunter, and Yaron explains that today is the promotion exam for students who have come of age in the center of the gym. She points to a huge structure highlighted on the stage and asks if he can see that wall back there. Yaron explains that the monument is called the Wall of Trials and holds the energy of Leonidas I, requiring over 500 damage points to pass the test. The barbarian says the structure looks so fragile it would break with a simple touch, while the girl guides him toward the registration desk. At the reception desk, the clerk asks for the candidate's name, and the young woman confirms his full name is Wolfgang the Crepe. The staff member warns that foreigners without a passport need a guarantor, so Yaron offers her own archaeologist hunter license as collateral for the registration. Wolfgang points to a man dressed like a Spartan and asks what that is, and she explains that he is the wielder of the spear of Leonidas, signaling the start of the exam. The guide details that as soon as they place the spear on the pedestal in front of the wall, King Leonidas's power will fill the monument to begin the tests. The Spartan raises the glowing golden spear with both hands, channeling a very intense magical energy. He inserts the weapon into the pedestal and releases a large wave of golden light that begins activating the mechanisms of the Wall of Trials. A massive portal of circular energy begins to shine brightly on the monument's stone surface. Watching all that theatrics alongside the other competitors, the barbarian grumbles that they are making an unnecessary fuss. The examiner on stage calls for quiet throughout the gym and officially announces the start of the promotion test. At that moment, Wolfgang narrows his eyes and senses something unusual as he feels the powerful magical aura emanating from the altar. The Wall of Trials shines even brighter, releasing waves of golden energy all across the arena. The examiner repeats the request for participants to stay quiet and pay close attention to the exam instructions. The barbarian continues staring at the stage with extreme focus, intrigued by that deity's energy signature. Floating screens appear, revealing that the constellation of Leonidas has discovered someone interesting and demands that this person take the test as soon as possible. The crowd begins to whisper excitedly, surprised that a constellation is showing so much interest right off the bat and wanting to know who caught its eye. Without wasting time, the examiner calls the first participant on the list, Go-Yuna, belonging to the Blue Dragon clan, to step forward. A young woman with a ponytail walks confidently up to the stage while people comment that her family is very famous for producing talented hunters. The girl releases a strong bluish aura in front of the monument, making everyone praise her clan since she already holds a temporary contract with a deity. The examiners comment that the deity's eager appearance makes sense now, and believe that today they might witness a true permanent contract being formed. Go-Yuna gives a focused shout and gathers all her blue magical energy into her right fist to launch the strike. She leaps and delivers an extremely powerful punch against the golden energy portal of the Wall of Trials. Instantly, the monument screen displays the impressive mark of 1,254 damage points. Wolfgang asks if she did well, and Yaron confirms that such a score is worthy of an active professional hunter, something very rare for a student. The young woman shows a proud and confident smile, truly believing that she was the chosen one who caught Leonidas's attention. However, the floating notifications reappear, showing that Leonidas impatiently keeps demanding the next participant step up. The girl is left completely speechless and in a state of shock upon realizing that the deity was actually not interested in her at all. To make matters worse, the constellation of the Blue Rose expresses disappointment with Go-Yuna's performance and cancels her temporary contract. Desperate and unable to believe she lost her divine support, she feels a hand come down heavily on her shoulder. A built guy pushes the girl aside and arrogantly tells her to get out of the way, claiming that he is the real hero here. He mocks her for losing the temporary divine pact and says she should be grateful that a weakling like her was given a chance in the past. Spectators begin shouting the arrogant hunter's name, Kim Jin-woo, and comment that it is now clear the divine target was not the girl. The system reveals that the descendant constellation of the Barbarian sent immense power to Kim Jin-woo, drastically boosting the physical strength of his fist. He shouts confidently, stating that nobody else matters as long as he is in control of the situation. Jin-woo delivers his strike, charged with reddish energy against the wall, exclaiming that Leonidas's call was made exclusively for him. The impact creates such a violent shockwave that the examiners have to cover themselves to avoid being blown away by the force of the wind. The Wall of Trials displays the impressive mark of 2,039 damage points, leaving the entire crowd incredulous. The hunter flashes a smug smile at breaking this unprecedented record, while everyone around comments that this is the reason for the divine stir. Some people whisper that this score is equal to an experienced C-rank professional and admit he might be stronger than them. He looks straight up with arrogance and challenges the deity, asking if that grand feat is finally enough for Leonidas. But instead of receiving divine praise, the fighter's expression quickly turns to dread as he feels an overwhelming pressure. The Wall of Trials glows bright red, and the notification reveals the constellation of Leonidas's fury at the guy's audacity. Down on his knees and trembling under the immense weight of divine wrath, the hunter asks himself in despair why the god rejected him like that. Humiliated, he screams furiously, demanding answers from his own sponsoring deity, since he was certain Leonidas would be satisfied. The system screen glows, revealing that Leonidas I considers himself a legendary hero who has eliminated thousands of demons in the past. Caring nothing for that statement, the barbarian walks with heavy steps toward the stage, while the fallen guy asks himself in despair what is happening. Wolfgang stops in front of the scared guy, looks down at him with contempt, and coldly orders him to get lost because he is not the person the deity is looking for. Furious, the kid gets up screaming that today is not the old man's test day and says that if he crawled all the way here, he should at least wait his turn. The barbarian replies that the kid's turn is already over and warns him to beat it while he is still being nice, as he is only holding back because Yeren asked him to, completely beside himself. The guy grabs the warrior's arm from behind and asks if his words sound like some kind of joke to him. Wolfgang just glances sideways at his arm and takes a deep breath, maintaining his composure with great effort. In that tense moment, he shifts his eyes toward the crowd and locks his gaze directly onto Yeren, seeking the guide's reaction. The young archaeologist discreetly shakes her head from side to side, silently begging him not to cause trouble. Upon receiving the girl's signal, the barbarian closes his eyes for a second and makes a decision on what to do with the pushy guy. The guy points a furious finger and demands an immediate apology for Wolfgang addressing his guardian deity without any respect. He pokes the barbarian's chest provocatively, yelling that trash like him has no right to disrespect his guardian god. He keeps up the arrogant threats, warning that if Wolfgang acts like this just because he thinks he is tough, the deity will get mad and destroy him. Keeping his composure, the barbarian calmly asks if they shouldn't hear the god's own opinion directly. The hero puffs out his chest, says aloud that his name is Wolfgang the Crepe, and states that any descendant of a barbarian would remember that name very well. Suddenly, a massive and brilliant pillar of bluish light bursts from the guy's body, and he starts screaming without understanding what is happening. A colossal spiritual projection of the legendary barbarian hero materializes above them in the arena, emanating indescribable power. Yeren watches the scene in absolute shock and mutters in disbelief about the extremely rare direct manifestation of a constellation. The giant spirit of the deity opens its glowing eyes and solemnly addresses Wolfgang as the great hero of the barbarians. Wolfgang asks if the god got upset because he spoke without formalities, and the spirit humbly replies that the fault lies solely in the ignorance of his young disciple. Controlling the guy's body, the deity humbly begs Wolfgang's forgiveness for his wielder's insolent behavior. The barbarian decides to make an exception and forgive him, but points out that the kid is misusing his power and suggests measures be taken. The god fully agrees with the observation and states seriously that punishing the kid was his real intention from the start. At that exact moment, the strong spiritual energy disconnects violently from the guy, abruptly severing his connection. All the magical aura filling the arena begins to dissipate into the air like smoke, leaving the environment calm once more. Jinwoo passes out cold, and the notifications reveal that the deity permanently broke contracts with him and his entire influential family. The people around panic, unable to understand how an ordinary person could be important enough to make a god act in such a humble way. Wolfgang stands ground firmly in the same spot, maintaining his imposing posture of a legendary warrior. While everyone rushes to help the passed-out kid, the hero turns his attention back to the altar and calls out for the god Leonidas. With a confident smile, he warns the god that he will need to use a bit of his brute strength and asks if the wall of trials will be able to hold up. The golden spear vibrates intensely, and the system reveals that Leonidas I is deeply moved and burning with the will of Sparta. Wolfgang thanks the Spartan god for the positive response and praises the deity's courage and determination. He adds that since the deity raised its energy so high, he will also make a point of showing what a true barbarian is capable of. The hero releases a monstrous amount of dark blue energy, generating a wind pressure so strong it makes the entire arena shake. The participants around go into total despair and try to grab onto one another so they aren't swept away by the gale force wind. The violent windstorm blows equipment around and startles even the most experienced examiners present in the gym. Struggling to stay on her feet, Yeren realizes in terror that this no longer looks anything like a simple entrance exam. She realizes with amazement that instead of being tested by the wall, Wolfgang is actually testing the limits of the god Leonidas himself. The young woman can barely believe a mere human has the audacity and power required to challenge a guardian deity head-on. On the pedestal, the tip of Leonidas' sacred spear begins to glow with incredible intensity under the pressure of the barbarian's aura. Wolfgang advises the god to give up and wave the white flag, stating with total conviction that he has no intention of losing that clash. With a powerful battle cry, he charges forward at top speed, winding up a devastating punch aimed right at the stone monument. Yeren covers her face in panic upon noticing the force of the strike is infinitely greater than before, fearing the entire structure might collapse on them. She prays desperately for someone strong to show up and step in quickly before that massive release of energy causes a tragedy in the venue. However, to everyone's absolute surprise in the arena, the crushing wind pressure completely vanishes the very next second. She looks around confused and notices that the people in the back have expressions of total shock, not understanding what happened. Suddenly, she feels a friendly tap on her shoulder and gives a small jump of surprise upon seeing that the barbarian is already standing beside her again. Calmly, he tells the guide he is leaving, as that silly test has completely lost its purpose for him. Confused, she runs after him asking where he is going and what happened to the hunter exam he needed to take. Meanwhile, one of the assistants calls out to the chief examiner, questioning why he is walking toward the wall instead of helping the injured guy on the ground. The assistant runs desperately toward the pedestal and reports in shock that Leonidas' sacred relic is completely shattered. The examiner falls into despair, not knowing what to do as he notices deep cracks spreading rapidly across the wall of trials. The massive stone structure completely collapses onto the gym floor, creating a huge cloud of dust and debris around the terrified staff member. In a waiting room, the two watch the news broadcast about the destroyed relic, and Wolfgang casually comments that the wall held up pretty well, but was no match for him. An electronic chime rings in the room, indicating on the digital display board that customer number 116 should head to the service counter. Yeren asks him to set his drink aside and calls him to follow her to the service desk immediately. At the service counter, the clerk asks the hero if his registered name is really Wolfgang, and he confirms simply and directly. The clerk warns that to issue the license, they need to settle the damage from the broken relic, charging a compensation fee of 100 million won to his guarantor. Hearing the absurd amount demanded for the damage, Yeren turns pale and completely horrified, asking if the charge is really 100 million. The clerk hands over Wolfgang's F-rank license and says they are lucky, as the charge is only for the wall, since there was no protocol to charge for the unbreakable relic sitting on a park bench. Yeren hands over the license and says he gained an account with a negative balance of 90 million, which is the remaining debt from the damage caused. The barbarian innocently asks if that amount is a lot of money, and she, totally desperate, confirms it is a fortune, and wonders how she will pay all that by herself. Wolfgang questions if hunters don't make a lot of money, and she sighs glumly, explaining that only applies to top-tier professionals. The young woman laments that archaeologists like her rely solely on sponsorships and explains how hard it is for an F-rank hunter to scrape together a fortune hunting monsters. The hero understands that F ranks only hunt weak, low-value creatures, but says he doesn't care, asserting he can take down hundreds of them with just one punch. With a focused gaze, the barbarian asks where the nearest dungeon is, and demands she guide him there immediately to get to work. While walking toward the subway, she explains he needs to hire an agency to work, and the barbarian compares the system to the ancient guilds of his era. Yeren details that agencies collect loot and secure dungeon entry permits, and Wolfgang sums it up by saying they act merely as middleman brokers. The young woman agrees and explains that despite charging high fees, they resolve disputes efficiently, which makes the service quite beneficial for warriors. However, upon trying to register at the first agency, they are turned down on the spot with the excuse that foreigners are not accepted by the company. At the next agency, the staff also refused to sign a deal, claiming Wolfgang lacks a graduation diploma from the official Hunter Academy. The barbarian starts getting annoyed upon hearing from another company that they require a stellar credit history, something he obviously lacks due to being from the past. Wolfgang complains that modern people talk way too much, while the guide justifies it by saying combat squads need people with reliable backgrounds before sending them to fight. Suddenly, the young hunter turns around alertly upon noticing someone approaching them from behind in the middle of the commercial street. The hero stares at her seriously and questions why people of this modern era judge everything through such complex rules and bureaucracy. Yeren suggests that him looking like a foreigner makes things harder and proposes he shave his beard, but backs off remembering he wears a wild wolf pelt. The warrior proudly explains that a beard represents a barbarian's honor and reveals that his fur cape belonged to the legendary Fenrir wolf clan Desperate. She asks what good pride is if they are in debt, insisting he should at least change clothes to be able to work in the city. A man in a suit timidly approaches to speak with them, but the barbarian turns sharply and asks in a booming voice what he wants. The suited man keeps a polite smile and asks if they aren't the pair walking down the street looking for a hunter agency. He introduces himself as a representative of the renowned MU agency and pitches his company, claiming they are the best organization in the industry. Yeren checks the info on her tablet and exposes the man, thinking to herself that the agency is actually famous for scamming and ripping off hunters. Inside the company's office, the agent comments that he saw the two of them get rejected everywhere and offers a special deal with reduced requirements. The young hunter lets out a tired sigh, aware that the agency acts like a gang of loan sharks and that no warrior in their right mind would accept the offer. The man proposes an unfair profit split of 6-4, requiring frequent dungeon visits in exchange for an initial bonus of 20 million won. She gets outraged by the abusive terms in the document, instantly concluding that it is nothing short of a modern slavery contract. Suddenly, the barbarian slams his fist on the table and demands 100 million won advance to sign the paper, ignoring Yeren's desperate protests. He argues that he needs exactly 100 million to clear the big debt, while the guide frantically tries to explain that things don't work like that. To the young woman's surprise, the agent takes advantage of the desperate situation and agrees to pay the 100 million won advance demanded by the warrior. However, flashing a dark smile in the shadows, the scammer demands in return that the contract last for 10 years with an equal profit split. Already at night on the street, Yeren complains angrily about him signing a paper full of harmful terms, asking if pacts meant nothing in his era. He counters saying he knows full well the value of a commitment and reminds her that many suffered terrible tragedies in the past because of bad divine pacts. The girl puts her hand to her forehead in a sign of despair and exhaustion, unable to comprehend how he could accept those terms so impulsively. Wolfgang proudly explains that he always does everything to repay the help of those who support him, and that this is his non-negotiable code of life. He reinforces that his one true goal is for her to use every possible resource to find the demon that wiped out his beloved tribe in the past. The warrior reveals that his pact with the archangel guarantees the resurrection of his people if he defeats the villain, saying that seeing his family together again is all he wants. Touched, the young woman apologizes for not understanding the weight of his tragedy and explains she worries because he is the first warrior from another era she has ever met. She flashes a gentle smile and takes on a personal commitment to do her absolute best to help him adapt and live safely in this new modern world. The MU agent interrupts the conversation to helpfully announce that the lodging provided for them is ready and suggests they move in immediately. Meanwhile, a social media message spreads rapidly across the internet, asking if everyone has seen the explosive news report about the destroyed relic Kang Yeren lying in bed, sees on her phone that the news about the broken relic went viral, and confirms to her friends that the stone statue really did wake up. She acknowledges that the feat is historic, but complains discontentedly that it almost turned her into a completely broke debtor in modern banks. In the chat, Yeren vents that she is struggling because she can't communicate with him, but refuses a friend's suggestion to pass the Barbarian over to her care. The next day, the MU agency agent talks with the supervisor and Wolfgang, deciding it is time for them all to head to the work site together. Wolfgang walks with his usual serious expression, wearing his wolf pelt. While Yeren watches him from afar with a quite concerned look, the Barbarian glances back out of the corner of his eye, noticing the young woman's attention as she keeps following him closely with her eyes. Yeren sighs worriedly about whether the big guy will manage on his own, and regrets in her thoughts not having bought at least a few sodas for him. The employee shows the lodging to Wolfgang, who enters the space carrying his giant sword and immediately asks when he can start going to the dungeons. The man at the door explains that he can participate in hunts on the 5 weekdays, with 2 of those trips being strictly mandatory. The warrior asks if there would be any problem if he decided to go on all 5 hunting opportunities, and the agent promptly answers no. He mentions that the departure time will be sent to the provided phone and instructs the hero to check his messages to show up punctually at the building's courtyard. The employee says goodbye, wishing him a good rest, and notes that the 2 will meet again the next day for the first mission alone in the dark room. Wolfgang observes the small space and grumbles that the tiny room is the size of the inn he used in the dwarves' cave. He sits on the bed and thinks the place might be a little better than that ancient lodging, but soon decides he needs to find the room's latrine. The Barbarian looks around in the dark and concludes that he first needs a lit torch to be able to see the way and move around the room. At that moment, he remembers there is that mobile phone device, which is that modern, rectangular object that emits a bright, strong light. Upon picking up the golden card resting on top of the box, the hero gets confused about how to use it and notes that the object seems much smaller than Yeren's phone. He stares at the piece of golden plastic without understanding a thing, thinking to himself that this new era is full of things he cannot grasp. The warrior realizes right off the bat that trying to adapt to the customs and technologies of this new time period will definitely be no easy task. The next day, under a bright blue sky, the supervisor shouts in the courtyard to gather all the hunters assigned to the new dungeon raid. The supervisor turns around annoyed and asks aloud who that ridiculous giant dressed up like that in the middle of everyone is. He confirms to a colleague that he is indeed the rookie, and asks Wolfgang if he really intends to enter the dungeon wearing those clothes. Wolfgang stares at the man with a deeply irritated look, and gets enraged that he dares to look at him with such insolence. The Barbarian then remembers Yeren's warning, who had said she wouldn't stop him from going, but demanded a promise that he would never attack another human being. In the memory, he had questioned why he had to make such an oath, seeing no point in such a strict rule. The young hunter explained that things have changed, and that the hunter's strength is the biggest reason humanity manages to stand against the demon invasion. She added that there is another equally important factor, which is the extremely advanced information network they possess nowadays. Furthermore, the girl warned that modern society has a massive and intolerable aversion to any situation where humans attack other humans. She reminded the Barbarian that he holds a crucial personal goal, which is finding the whereabouts of the demon that destroyed his clan in the past. In the hero's memory, she shakes her head worriedly and anxiously, trying to convince him that acting with violence would only bring more trouble. Yeren concluded by warning that if he attacks people and makes enemies everywhere he goes, it will be even harder to get any leads on the monster. Back in the present, the Barbarian swallows his anger and mentally repeats the man's line about being stared at in that insolent way. The man warns that they are going to a slime dungeon, not to shoot a movie, ordering him to quickly change into a special protective suit. The supervisor touches Wolfgang's massive sword and asks what that metal slab is supposed to be, hearing from the hero that it is his weapon. The man tells him to leave the weapon behind as it won't be necessary, and annoyed, demands he take the opportunity to shower before changing clothes. Wolfgang closes his eyes, trying to contain his rage, and sharply accepts the supervisor's orders, deciding to follow the rules of that world. The Barbarian begins undressing right there in the open courtyard, leaving the horrified supervisor shouting, asking what kind of pervert he thinks he is. Wolfgang asks if they didn't just tell him to wash up and change, demanding they point out where the stream is, while the man shouts, calling him an idiot. A small blue truck rumbles along a narrow dirt road, cutting through a vast region surrounded by rocky mountains. In the front seat, a young hunter yawns, complaining about the distance, but the supervisor tells him to stop whining since it's a B-rank dungeon. The hunter scoffs, saying the place is practically F-rank, and that their only job there will be collecting slime remains from the floor. He explains to the supervisor that he desperately needs money to pay the registration fee for the official hunter promotion exam. The man doubts the kid's ability and says that is the easiest way to make cash, since just picking up dead monsters carries no danger. The youth counters, saying the pay keeps getting worse, but the driver loses his patience and shouts at him to quit if he's unsatisfied. The truck finally arrives near a structure housing the dungeon, while Wolfgang rides in silence with crossed arms in the flatbed. The friendly MU agent waiting for them at the dungeon entrance greets the supervisor and notes that the drive they took was long. The hunter finds the assistant manager's presence there strange and hears from the agent that he came in person to monitor the rookie's first field mission. The agent asks about the new hunter's performance, but the grumpy supervisor replies that he wants to discuss another urgent matter first. Upon spotting the warrior climbing down from the truck bed, the assistant manager is shocked and asks in terror why he is dressed like that. Wolfgang explains that they forced him to take off his pelts and put on that weird blue jumpsuit, but assures him the new outfit doesn't restrict his movements. The agent explains that mobility isn't the only issue, insisting that Wolfgang should wear a full protective suit due to the dangers of the slime dungeon. The supervisor vents his frustration to the assistant, justifying that there was no alternative because the barbarian is so massive no protective suit fits him. The assistant says it's fine as long as he wears at least a gas mask, instructing the hero to just be careful to avoid contact with slime fragments. He instructs the supervisor to fetch a proper suit while the team cleans the first floor, and the two step aside to discuss the urgent matter mentioned earlier. The supervisor still shows uncertainty and asks the manager if he really thinks just a gas mask will be enough to ensure safety on the floor. The man assures him the first floor is safe because it only contains monster remains, but warns that from the second floor down, there are still live, dangerous creatures. He asks them to start work on the first floor while he fetches the special suit, and seriously warns Wolfgang never to go down to the second floor without protection. With preparations complete, the group finally enters the dungeon with the simple mission of collecting all the slime remains scattered across the inner area. The escort reiterates that on the first floor, the only real danger is the toxic gas. But the young hunter impatiently says this isn't his first time there. Wolfgang turns to them and asks with great interest if there really are many remains of these slimes scattered along the dungeon paths. Next, he points to the containers strapped to his back and questions what the limit of collection jars they have available is. The guy asks worriedly if the barbarian can really handle the weight, explaining that the containers are made of special glass and tend to be extremely heavy. The youth says each empty vessel weighs 10 kilograms and full ones exceed 30, but Wolfgang responds with disdain that his only regret is not being able to carry more. The kid asks if his partner has dealt with slimes before, and the warrior reveals he only knows of their existence, as he always considered them creatures far too weak to fight. The guy says this is a good chance to learn, but finds the lack of remains along the path strange until he spots a monster carcass lying on the ground up ahead. He picks up the hardened slime to show Wolfgang and seriously warns that even dead, these creatures remain poisonous and should never be touched without protective gloves. Ignoring the advice, Wolfgang grabs the monster directly with his bare hand to gauge the poison, leaving his young companion completely panicked and in shock. The kid frantically holds his hand, demanding to inspect the warrior's skin, warning in desperation that direct contact with the carcass's poison should melt his flesh. However, examining the hero's fingers up close, the youth realizes in surprise that the barbarian's skin is perfectly intact, without a single burn from the poison. The young hunter is left completely speechless and asks in confusion how it's possible that the barbarian is totally fine. After holding the toxic creature directly, Wolfgang tosses the monster into the jar and mockingly repeats the warning about the danger, making the kid yell that he literally just said the exact same thing seconds ago. The warrior holds up his index finger and states with conviction that his flesh wouldn't melt from a weak poison like that, leaving the youth dumbfounded right after. Wolfgang pulls the gas mask off his head, commenting dissatisfied that the modern accessory is extremely uncomfortable to breathe in. The kid asks in shock if he can really breathe the toxic gas without protection, but the barbarian says he's fine and tells him to focus on earning their money. The guy recalls his own earlier conversation with the supervisor in the truck, when he vented about his desperate need for money to take the hunter exam. Impressed, the youth asks how the barbarian's hearing is sharp enough to have heard that conversation from afar, but the warrior just tells him to shut up and walk. Shortly after, at the back of the first floor, the guy laments in frustration that they haven't even filled a single jar and wonders why there are so few monster remains. He explains glumly that normally they would have filled at least 2 containers by now and fears they will end up taking a loss on today's hunt. The barbarian suggests going down one more level of the dungeon to seek more prey, but the kid immediately refuses, saying it's way too dangerous for 2 F-rank hunters. The hero insists they are indeed going down and promises he will fill every jar for him, but the kid asks not to push their luck and to just accept today's financial loss. The guy reinforces that the danger is real, since he is completely without protection against the poison of live monsters, but Wolfgang firmly counters that it doesn't matter. Still hesitant, the youth asks one more time if he is absolutely sure of what he's doing, and the barbarian confirms with a serious look as he starts descending the steps. The warrior adds that there is something bothering him a lot ever since they walked in, leaving his young partner curious about what that problem could be. He reveals that the noise coming from the floor below is strange and asserts with absolute certainty that he can feel the evil presence of a demon dwelling in the dark. Meanwhile, at the association headquarters, Yeren tries to make a call on her phone, but hears an automated message saying the dialed number is not in service. She gets confused and wonders if the agency hadn't issued a company phone to Wolfgang and sent the correct contact info directly to her. The assistant manager walks worriedly beside her, commenting that the association doesn't have a protective suit that fits Wolfgang's colossal size. He says on the phone that ordering a new one will take a week and asks the team to wrap up work on the first floor, catching the attention of Yeren, who recognizes him. The man hangs up the call, complaining he will have to take the bus back to the slime dungeon, and impatiently grumbles that he needs to buy a car as soon as possible. Suddenly, Yeren appears quickly at his side and asks in terror if the hero is really in that slime dungeon, scaring the poor employee half to death. She demands explanations, asking why the barbarian's phone is out of service if they said they had delivered the device, and the man says he doesn't get it either. Totally furious, the young hunter demands to be taken there immediately, making it clear she wants to go straight to the dungeon where the warrior is hunting. Meanwhile, at the entrance to the second level of the slime dungeon, a large, greenish, gelatinous creature drips from the ceiling toward the stone floor. Wolfgang stares at the live slime and realizes it's active, while his partner yells desperately for him to be careful because live creatures carry far more poison. Without a second's hesitation, the barbarian reaches out his free hand and grabs the live monster's slimy body with force, making the acidic toxin sizzle against his skin. He squeezes the slime easily and deposits it into the container, commenting satisfied that gathering monsters on the second floor is an infinitely faster process. The kid celebrates, overjoyed seeing the first container completely full, thinking that amount will already be enough to pay his exam fee. Satisfied, the guy suggests they head back right away since they filled all the jars they brought, eager to receive his well-deserved pay for the day's work. However, silence suddenly takes over the dark hallway of the lower floor, and a mysterious, dangerous atmosphere begins to spread rapidly through the place. Looking toward the opening that leads to the next level, the young hunter falls into absolute despair upon considering that the barbarian might have gone down alone to the third floor. The hunter nervously explains that no one is allowed to enter the third floor, as that is a strictly restricted access area. He emphasizes that the area is managed by the powerful Holy Star Guild and warns that any hunter who disobeys the rules is practically as good as dead. The youth runs down the dark hallway, calling out for Wolfgang and shouting that he really shouldn't be in that forbidden place under any circumstances. Reaching the end of the path, the guy stands jaw-dropped, seeing the Slime King trapped inside a barrier, realizing that all the monsters on the other floors originate right here. The hunter explains that the machine is a mana injector, responsible for keeping the containment barrier active by constantly supplying energy to it. He points to the machinery around and details that smaller slimes are born inside it and stream out endlessly through several small industrial pipes. The kid adds that the newly created small creatures naturally move toward the upper floors. Drawn by the light of the exit, he realizes indignantly that these were the monsters they were collecting and that the Holy Star Guild was just using this secret setup to rake in huge profits. Suddenly, a strong draft begins to blow through the area, and Wolfgang, with his sharp perception, immediately notices that the energy flow has shifted. The cave floor begins to shake violently, leaving the young hunter terrified and unable to understand what is happening around them. The warrior points upward toward the industrial pipes and calmly warns that the mysterious tremor is coming directly from the floor above. They watch in awe as a massive pile of urban trash plunges down from above, landing straight inside the huge reservoir where the Slime King is trapped. Seeing that bizarre scene, Wolfgang scowls in confusion and asks if the humans from that guild are deliberately feeding the massive monster. The kid confirms in shock that the giant creature is greedily devouring all that trash being dumped directly from the surface. A few highly toxic and acidic green drops begin dripping from a metal pipe above, making strange noises as they hit the floor. The barbarian finds it unbelievable that the guild members are getting so rich off feeding a monstrous creature nothing but waste and discarded garbage. At that moment, a golden system message pops up floating in the air, revealing that the language translation skill granted by Archangel Seraph has been activated. The hunter notices his distraction and asks if he heard something again, but the warrior replies thoughtfully that it isn't actually a sound. Suddenly, an intense green glow emanates from inside the large containment tube, catching the immediate attention of the guy who watches cautiously. He points desperately toward the courtyard, warning that all the small slimes that were previously going up and out have now decided to turn around and come back. Two small gelatinous creatures leap violently toward Wolfgang, hitting the warrior's face hard and spreading across his skin. Dozens of monsters begin leaping desperately onto the barbarian, covering his entire body in acid while the kid screams in terror for his partner. Wolfgang closes his eyes calmly, maintaining an unbothered posture even while completely covered in the creature's highly corrosive acidic slime. A mysterious, anguish-filled voice echoes directly inside the hero's mind through his skill, desperately pleading for the word death. The hero opens his eyes attentively and realizes the Slime King possesses intelligence, responding mentally to the creature upon noticing it is capable of communicating. In a deep spiritual connection, the great monster pleads once more in thought for the barbarian to put an end to its suffering and take its life already. The warrior says he will grant the wish if the monster answers his question, asking if it knows the current location of the terrible demon devil house. The creature answers sorrowfully that it unfortunately doesn't know, and the hero understands the situation, accepting the fact quite calmly. Back in the reality of battle, the barbarian keeps his eyes closed while the layer of acidic slimes completely covers his head and shoulders. The kid asks in terror if he's okay, noticing horrified that the blue outfit melted entirely, and asking if the harsh acid didn't cause any pain. Wolfgang tells the guy to stop asking questions, and reveals directly and seriously that the massive monster is desperately begging to be killed. The kid asks in shock if the Slime King really wants to die, and the experienced warrior confirms with certainty that this is indeed its only wish. The youth warns that this is a B-rank dungeon, and they are only F-rank, but Wolfgang ignores him and asks if breaking the machine will cause its death. The guy nervously confirms, but warns that he can't just break the machine out of nowhere, while the hero dismissively comments that the structure looks pretty fragile. The kid begs him not to break anything because of the managing guild and suggests they go back, but Wolfgang just calmly replies that he understands. The partner sighs in relief, thinking he agreed, but gets terrified the very next second seeing the barbarian clench his fist and strike the glass. The guy insists the machinery belongs to the influential Xiangshan Guild and begs once more to back off, but the hero merely asks if that's really how it is. The kid tries to keep explaining the worrying situation, but lets out a gasp of shock upon noticing deep cracks spreading across the glass. Panicking, the guy steps in front of him with open arms. Shouting that this is a restricted guild area and asking how they will handle the fallout, Wolfgang stares at him with an imposing, serious gaze, firmly ordering him to get out of the way because he has an important promise to keep to the monster. The hunter tries to argue about legal penalties, but the barbarian coldly cuts him off, saying it's far too late to worry about those terms. He curses in absolute terror, noticing that the protective barrier keeping the Slime King isolated and contained is unraveling and collapsing for good. The youth looks at the ground and wonders in horror why all the tiny gelatinous creatures have started shaking and acting in such a chaotic, bizarre way. Wolfgang orders him to run away immediately to save himself, but the partner hesitates, not knowing how he could abandon him alone in such an extreme situation. The warrior warns that the machine will blow up soon, and the guy, even while running desperately toward the exit, screams begging him to make it out alive. With a subtle look of confidence, the warrior thinks to himself that the kid's concern for his physical safety is completely useless. The youth dashes up the stairs crying and shouting from afar that he is going ahead, but demands again that the barbarian make it out alive no matter what, seeing that his companion has finally made it a safe distance away. Wolfgang turns back toward the barrier and announces it's time to act. He delivers a devastating punch that shatters the containment machine entirely, triggering a violent, bright explosion of green energy throughout the cave. A massive, completely blinding flash takes over the entire subterranean area, marking the end of the terrible Slime King's confinement in that dungeon. The massive green shockwave spreads devastatingly through the underground cave following the violent blow delivered by Wolfgang outside. The mountainous landscape surrounding the dungeon entrance is illuminated by the beautiful, soft orange glow of the sunset. The manager of the MU agency arrives at the scene in a gray van alongside Yeren. Politely greeting the employee waiting at the entrance, the manager asks about the whereabouts of the F-rank hunters, and the employee apprehensively reports that they should have left the dungeon a long time ago. The man expresses surprise at the group's unusual delay and looks up toward the dungeon entrance together with the manager. Suddenly, a violent earthquake begins shaking the entire mountainous region, scaring off a large flock of birds flying nearby. Frightened by the strong impact shaking the vehicle, Yeren looks around through the van window, asking herself worriedly what is happening. The employees drop to their knees on the ground, claiming it's an earthquake, but Yeren steps out of the car, suspicious that there might be a much more serious problem. The young hunter notices the tremors are gradually dying down, and the assistant manager agrees in relief while trying to get up off the ground. The employee decides he needs to make an urgent report to his superiors, and mentions he will head into the dungeon to check if the F-rank hunters are okay. Yeren asks to join him in the search if there are extra gas masks available, leaving the assistant manager a bit hesitant about the idea. The Slime King questions if he wasn't going to kill him, but Wolfgang fairly argues that it would be too sad for him to die without first getting a chance to see the sunlight. The monster agrees with his words and asks to be brought outside, warning that the entire structure of the cave is on the verge of collapsing. The Slime King mentions he will latch onto the hero's body to come along, while Wolfgang grumbles playfully that the tactile sensation is pretty weird. Suddenly, massive light green slime tendrils burst with extreme violence through the dungeon entrance portal, flooding the outer area. The glowing gelatinous fluid gushes out at high speed in all directions, covering the ground and the entrance walls in a true greenish deluge. Yeren shields her head with her hands as she faces the immense dust and small stones tumbling down the hill due to the blast's heavy shockwave. Inside, the young hunter runs desperately holding his 2 full jars of slime, screaming in panic as he feels the entire structure shake violently. The floor gives way beneath his feet, and the glass containers fly from his hands as he screams in despair that the cave is coming down and the Slime King broke free. He keeps sprinting frantically through the stone tunnels while everything around him begins to crumble and collapse at a terrifying speed. Out of breath, the guy looks back in terror and tearfully warns that the creatures are advancing way too fast and they'll soon be overtaken. He curses out loud upon realizing that a massive, lethal surge of highly toxic slimes is right on his back in the middle of the hallway. Wolfgang comes sprinting right behind and uses his brute force to land quick strikes, warding off the horde of slimes trying to attack them from behind. With extremely heavy, decisive steps, the barbarian warrior rushes rapidly toward the exit, ignoring the green wave of monsters pursuing him. The guy spots with immense relief the bright sunlight streaming from the tunnel exit, shouting happily that they finally managed to reach the entrance. He sheds tears of happiness inside his protective helmet, mentally celebrating making it out alive from that terrible underground ordeal. The youth looks to the side in surprise upon noticing Wolfgang pulling up alongside him in the sprint, maintaining an unbelievably calm expression despite the imminent danger. Suddenly, Wolfgang's massive hand grabs the guy's collar, making the kid think in panic whether he was just used as live bait. To the young hunter's surprise, the strong barbarian hurls him forward with all his might to launch him straight to safety outside. The kid flies through the air, letting out desperate screams of panic, while Wolfgang takes a giant leap right behind him to escape the cave-in. The guy lands clumsily and rolls several times across the association's raised courtyard floor, finally safe from the dungeon's collapse. In midair, Wolfgang displays a focused, fierce glare as he prepares to land and deal with the gigantic monsters emerging right behind him. The moment he lands, a massive torrent of green liquid bursts from the cave, shattering the stone floor and spreading like a colossal acidic wave. The gigantic slimy tentacle rises imposing above the courtyard wall, casting a massive shadow over the area against the beautiful sunset. Down below, the agency manager and employee watch the massive green mass raised in the sky, paralyzed in complete shock and awe. Standing beside the car, Yeren also looks up horrified as she witnesses the rise of that colossal creature threatening to cover the entire sky. However, the gigantic Slime King simply settles peacefully on the raised courtyard under the watchful and surprised gaze of Wolfgang and his young partner. The youth approaches him confused and asks why he brought the monster outside if he had previously promised he was going to take down the Slime King for good. The hero calmly explains he made a deal with him and asks if someone who spent so much time locked in the dark didn't deserve to see the light of the sun one last time. The young hunter is deeply moved and touched as he understands the great empathy and massive respect the warrior showed for the creature. Wolfgang extends his hand, handing over a small, glowing purple orb to the kid, who takes it hesitatingly and asks in surprise what that object is. The barbarian explains that it is the Slime King's vital core and reveals that the massive monster will finally pass on if that glowing little gem is detonated. He adds that part of the creature's total power will be transferred to whoever destroys it, leaving the guy stunned at the possibility of such a boost. Holding the glowing purple orb with both hands, the young hunter stares at the barbarian quite confused and asks why he is handing over something so valuable. The warrior says he doesn't need that power and asks him to accept it out of gratitude, since a barbarian's code requires him to repay those who helped him. The kid remains in total silence, staring at his companion with a look filled with admiration for his nobility and respectful actions. As it peacefully melts under the warm sunlight, the Slime King thanks Wolfgang in thought, commenting that the outside world and the sunlight are amazing. Wolfgang spots Yeren from afar in the lower courtyard and waves happily at her, asking aloud if the young hunter came in person to receive him. He runs down the courtyard stairs excitedly to meet Yeren, who is surprised by his energy and enthusiasm right after an intense hunt. On the phone, the supervisor asks for as many trucks to be dispatched urgently as possible, noting impressed that the amount of collected loot is truly colossal. Yeren asks if there's any problem with taking Wolfgang away, and the supervisor authorizes it, commenting that closing the paperwork for payouts will take a few hours. The young hunter rushes him to get into the car quickly, while the hero grumbles and asks why she is in such a hurry all of a sudden inside the van. Yeren accuses him of having caused the major accident with the slimes, but the barbarian denies it, making her insist that anyone could see it was his fault. Yeren orders the driver to head out as soon as possible, while Wolfgang counters with total calmness that he merely fulfilled a promise made to the Slime King without understanding. Yeren changes the subject and says they need to hurry, because there is someone very important who spent the whole day anxiously waiting to meet him. Wolfgang gets deeply thrilled, thinking if they finally got a real lead on the terrible demon Devil House, his major rival from the past. Under the starry night canopy, the gray van arrives at a modern, well-lit commercial building and parks right in front of the main entrance. Meanwhile, back at the dungeon, the supervisor asks why the manager hasn't left yet, and he replies that he needs to wait for payment confirmation from the agency. The young hunter agrees, noting that dozens of cargo trucks arrive to handle the transport, and the supervisor says goodbye, saying he'll head out first on the phone. The assistant exasperatedly repeats to headquarters that the total amount of slimes collected wasn't 150 kilograms, but rather 150 tons. On the other end of the line, a furious team leader screams from her luxurious office room, asking if an absurd quantity like that is even physically possible. Team leader Kang Mi-yeon rants angrily on the phone, asking if he, in her place, would easily release an astounding payment of 1,400,000,000. She complains heatedly that such a colossal amount would be charged for just one day's work by a mere F rank, indignantly ordering her brother to use his head. The boss orders him to go right back down into the dungeon immediately to investigate if there is a severe problem down there, and the guy just consents, sweating nervously. After hanging up, the guy grumbles angrily about his sister being the team leader, and the other employee asks if she is really refusing to approve the payments he shares, frustrated that she ordered the dungeon checked again, and complains bitterly to his partner that it's miserable enough having to work so much overtime. He says goodbye, lamenting that a mere low-level employee has no choice but to follow orders, and warns his colleague that the payout process will be delayed. In another scene, we see water pouring abundantly and continuously from the bathroom shower. Creating a thick, warm mist of steam throughout the room, Wolfgang takes a shower and marvels at seeing water falling inside a house, thinking to himself that the more he analyzes that modern plumbing, the more fascinated he becomes. The barbarian shouts from the bathroom, asking what the mechanism behind that water is, and asks if they store rain on the roof, making Yeren outside quite impatient. Yeren tells him to stop babbling and says the person waiting for him is a crucial figure who will help them get leads on the terrible demon's current. Whereabouts, Wolfgang willingly accepts her guidance and agrees to wear the largest modern clothes the hunter managed to put together on short notice for him to use. Walking down the hallway, the hero asks if the visitor is someone important, and she explains he is the respected official leader of all archaeologist hunters. Noticing the tight fit of his outfit, she proposes buying better shoes and clothes the next day, and the great warrior agrees simply and directly. Yeren opens the office door and the visitor complains laughingly that he spent the day without eating. Hearing from her a request to handle introductions while she grabs food, the young hunter apologizes for the visitor's long wait and proudly introduces the imposing barbarian warrior Wolfgang as her new hunting partner. Yeren formally introduces the man with glasses and gray hair named Dr. Choi Myungjun, politely asking the two of them to greet each other. As he shakes his hand, Wolfgang formally introduces himself as the hero of the Wolf Tribe, while the B-rank group physician says it's a pleasure to meet him. With an air of innocence, the warrior comments that he heard he is the leader of that archaeology stuff and asks where the base of that mysterious ancient tribe is located. The doctor lets out a smile and patiently explains that archaeology isn't actually a tribe, but rather a field of study focused on the history of the past. The barbarian understands, and, after a loud growl comes from his stomach, practically suggests that since formal greetings are done, they should eat something on top of the office desk. Several boxes filled with crispy, golden brown fried chicken are opened, spreading a delicious, mouth-watering aroma throughout the room. The doctor tells him to eat without rushing and promises to order more boxes of chicken if food runs short, while Yaren gently hands him a very large bottle of cola. While drinking the soda straight from the bottle, the warrior gets straight to the point and asks Dr. Choi what the exact reason for wanting to meet him was. The specialist explains that he has a few important questions for him, and Wolfgang helpfully replies that he will answer everything within his power. The doctor curiously asks how the barbarian manages to speak modern Korean so well and without any inconsistency or weird accent, sounding just like a local. The warrior reveals he received holy protection from the archangels and that the ability to comprehend and speak any language in the world fluently is just one of them. Quite confused and surprised by that answer, the doctor adjusts his glasses and asks if these angels he speaks of might actually be the names of some constellations. This time, it's the barbarian who gets intrigued by the term and asks what a constellation is. Hearing from the doctor that he actually saw one active during his test exam, the specialist recalls that constellations resemble those warrior deities of the past, citing the legendary Spartan hero Leonidas as a clear example. He brings to mind other examples and mentions those giant spiritual entities that call themselves the true, legendary descendants of ancient barbarians. Wolfgang lets out a subtle smirk and dismissively comments that those weak entities they were talking about were actually called constellations. He explains that angels are on a whole different level and reveals that one day those celestial entities went to his barbarian tribe to make a great petition. Shortly after hearing Wolfgang's entire story, Dr. Choi decides to summarize the main points in thought to better organize the information. He understands that in the warrior's era, angels and demons fought violent battles and that the barbarian clans chose to join the conflict at the deity's request. However, he sadly concludes that the entire tribe ended up slaughtered and that Wolfgang was the sole survivor who marched entirely alone seeking revenge. The doctor recalls that the hero managed to eliminate all the lesser demons along the way and finally found the terrible enemy leader named Devil House, but the barbarian clenches his fists in immense suppressed rage, remembering that he ended up falling for a dark spell cast by his rival and was turned to stone. Seeing his companion's distress, Yaren holds his hand warmly and comforts him with a friendly smile, assuring him they will locate the demon for good together. With a focused gaze and deeply committed to his grand life mission, the barbarian hero confirms in thought that he will indeed achieve his sought-after revenge. The barbarian hero lets out a long, deep sigh, trying to push away the intense anguish of his painful memories from the past. The doctor apologizes for making him recall something so painful, but Wolfgang firmly counters that it is a memory he must never forget. With a timid, hesitant look, Dr. Choi adjusts his glasses and politely asks if he could request one more big favor from the strong warrior. Wolfgang stares at him seriously and responds with his usual firm voice, granting permission for the specialist to speak his mind. The doctor says it sounds strange asking this of someone alive, but explains that since he was initially discovered as a relic, they need to verify his authenticity. The barbarian lets out a light, wry smile and repeats it to himself, finding amusement in the idea of being considered a historical relic by modern people. Dr. Choi moves toward his desk and starts digging through his suit jacket pockets to pull out a very important object for the verification. He displays a small carved statue and explains that it belongs to the constellation he has a contract with, a legendary warrior monk who led historic victories. The specialist proposes quickly summoning the constellation to perform the check and asks the hero if there's any problem with that, aware it might be uncomfortable. Wolfgang remains silent for a moment and just glances out of the corner of his eye toward his guarantor Yaren, seeking her input on the matter. With a sweet, pleading smile, Yaren begs him to cooperate, explaining that her professional success and recognition depend directly on this authentication. Seeing his young partner's pleading look, the barbarian sighs and mutters her name, showing it's impossible to refuse a sincere request coming from her. She promises the doctor will help find Devil House, and when Wolfgang gives in, the girl shouts excitedly for Dr. Choi to start the summoning right away. At that exact moment, the small Buddha statue in the specialist's hands begins to glow intensely with a massive, fiery, golden aura. The constellation appears imposing and issues a system message, acknowledging Wolfgang as the hero of the barbarians who put an end to the chaotic era of past wars. Dr. Choi is deeply shocked by the entity's revelation and repeats to himself, stunned, about the fact that Wolfgang ended a period of chaos. To everyone's surprise, the great Buddhist monk makes a respectful bow toward Wolfgang, paying tribute to the legendary hero who won the war. Wolfgang dismisses the formalities and thoughtfully comments that it was only a half-victory, leaving the doctor extremely surprised by the barbarian's immense humility. The spiritual projection fades, and the specialist apologizes embarrassedly, explaining that his mana ran out quickly due to the strong invocation. The man wipes away sweat with a handkerchief and smiles, satisfied upon confirming his identity is real, sincerely thanking the warrior's willingness to cooperate. Meanwhile, in the quiet and somber atmosphere of the abandoned dungeon, slow, heavy footsteps echo back toward the spot where the machinery used to be. Reaching the back of the third floor, the agency employee is completely horrified to run into the shattered massive containment barrier. Eyes wide in pure despair and panic under his protective helmet, he swallows hard, unable to comprehend why everything turned out like that. In her luxurious office, team leader Kang Mi-yeon slams her fist on the desk, enraged upon receiving the call, shouting horrified at the Slime King's disappearance from the dungeon. Her brother explains that the reservoir was totally destroyed and that the place is empty, leaving her incredulous upon learning that the sturdy containment chamber was broken. She threatens her brother in case this is a joke and says that not even she, an A-rank hunter, could destroy that, deducing that MU must have secretly sent an S-rank. Her brother insists he did a proper check and guarantees that the only ones who went in there that morning were F ranks, highlighting that one of them was a newly arrived rookie. Surprised, the team leader asks if he's sure the suspect is a rookie, and the guy confirms, revealing that the man obtained his official license just 1 day ago. With a sharp, dangerous gaze, she concludes that this mysterious rookie is certainly to blame for everything, and orders her brother to pull up and send over all his personal data. She explains she will file a damages lawsuit against the MU agency and will use the info and footage to secure concrete proof against the mysterious person responsible for the mess. The brother asks about the large pending payout amount, but the team leader loses her mind and screams, telling him to dismiss the collector without giving him a single cent. The next day, under a gorgeous blue sky with white clouds, Yaren and Wolfgang arrive at a huge commercial mall displaying a large red sale announcement sitting on a bench in a shoe store. The Barbarian gets his young partner's attention, saying he'd like to ask her a simple, quick question. Wolfgang holds up the golden card and asks, confused, how to make it work, explaining he thought the object was meant for talking to people far away. Yaren takes the golden card, stunned, and asks, surprised, if he really thought that was a cell phone, finally understanding the reason she couldn't call him. She asks if he received anything else besides the card, and the Barbarian answers yes, but reports that he left the other larger object in his room out of laziness. She explains with an awkward smile that he completely mixed up the cell phone device with the card, and the big guy just stares at her quite surprised. The warrior seriously counters, saying he had no way of knowing since nobody taught him, and asks why she's staring at him with that funny expression. She lets out a friendly laugh and says, "It's nothing," promising to explain the workings of every modern tech item in detail right after they finish shopping. The store clerk approaches them carrying a large shoebox and politely apologizes for the delay in finding an ideal model for him. The employee shows the largest pair available in the entire store, and Yaren is completely shocked to find out that the Barbarian's foot requires a size 18 shoe elsewhere. We see Wolfgang's registration photo being held by someone, highlighting his facial scar and intimidating legendary warrior expression. A guy in a floral shirt and sunglasses holds the photo, observing the target from afar, while Yaren helps Wolfgang pick out new clothes from a rack. Yaren watches the Barbarian try on an elegant long coat, and he comments thoughtfully from inside the fitting room that he's not sure if he's wearing the piece right. Wolfgang steps out of the fitting room dressed smartly, and she praises the modern look, but soon jokes, saying he ended up looking like a nice old grandpa. She adjusts his coat and suggests taking off the beret to improve the look, cheerfully commenting that now he looks like a modern man or even a pro fighter. Satisfied with the purchases, the two walk down the mall hallway while Yaren explains that dressing sharply is the normal standard in modern society. The hero comments that the modern era is full of complicated rules, and Yeren agrees, laughing, asking him to wait a second while she uses the public restroom nearby. Two mysterious thugs whisper to each other and plan to launch a surprise coordinated attack to knock out and subdue the barbarian without giving him a chance to react. Wolfgang walks alone and gets thoughtful when encountering the restroom signs, intrigued and not understanding why there are two separate doors in the hallway. While Wolfgang waits in the hallway, a system alerts that a sprint skill was activated by a hunter named Yoon Hoseong. Suddenly, a masked guy charges at high speed toward the barbarian, who calmly holds onto his shopping bags. The first attacker is easily dodged, and soon another annoyed hunter emerges, running in their direction with his fist engulfed in flames. The system alerts that the new opponent, named Jang Min-jae, has just activated a powerful heavy fire punch skill. Showing zero concern over the flaming attack, the barbarian hero simply extends his massive hand toward the enemy. Wolfgang immobilizes the man by easily grabbing his head, while the other hooded attacker is already defeated on the floor. The barbarian asks if the two were the idiots following him all day, demanding to know right away who sent them. Still pinned, the hunter asks if he is really Wolfgang, and orders him to come along without causing any trouble. In response, Wolfgang squeezes the man's head so hard it shatters his sunglasses, making him scream in pain. The man is incredulous at such strength from an F-rank hunter and desperately screams for his partner to get up and do something. With an extremely cold gaze, the barbarian repeats that he asked first and questions if they were sent by the Shongshin Guild. Meanwhile, in the women's restroom, Yeren washes her hands and thinks that Wolfgang takes a lot of work, hoping he adapts soon. She worries if he knows how to use a public restroom and laments that she can't go in there to help him with those modern things. Wolfgang lets go of the enemy and tells him to warn his boss that if this happens again, their entire tribe will be completely destroyed. Thoroughly terrified and bruised, the two thugs decide to get out of there quickly while lamenting the mission's failure. The barbarian remains standing in the hallway beside the broken glasses. Right at the moment Yeren steps out of the restroom and finds him, Yeren suggests they grab a bite before heading home, where she promises to teach him how to use the phone and card, and Wolfgang agrees. She asks what he wants to eat and tells him to pick anything, since they are going to spend all the money from Dr. Choi's card today elsewhere. A cell phone rings with the news that the Shongshin Guild has filed a multi-billion won lawsuit over the dungeon raid incident. Junhwan takes a sip of his drink and comments that blaming their agency makes no sense, since the hunters sent there were only F rank. The manager explains that the rival guild is demanding a massive payout instead of paying what was agreed, leaving Junhwan quite pissed off. The man asks if Junhwan is sure the pair sent were F rank, and he guarantees he checked the licenses personally. Junhwan recalls that he used to be a hunter in the past and states with total conviction that he knows very well how this business works. The manager then suggests they review together the video the Shongshin Guild sent as evidence to support their accusation. They begin watching on the phone the recording of the fight, where Wolfgang utterly humiliates the two thugs. The manager explains that the hooded guy down on the ground is Yoon Hoseong, an E-rank who easily holds his own against D-rank hunters. He points to the other pinned hunter and reveals that he is D-rank, highlighting that both were completely humiliated by Wolfgang. The manager says the rival guild wants to know who is behind them and why they hid those hunters' true rank. Junhwan stands up furious at the suspicion and says he's going over there to demand answers, but the manager asks him to calm down a bit. The manager says the important thing is for them to be clean and suggests filing a lawsuit against the other guild to recover their money. Junhwan agrees and mentions he needs to go to Cheongdam to meet a rookie hunter to finalize an important business contract. Stepping out of the commercial building, Junhwan quickly gets into a taxi and asks the driver to take him directly to Cheongdam inside the car. He mentally complains about the rival guild's dirty tricks and wonders when he'll manage to save enough money to own his own car. Suddenly, Junhwan stops tapping on his phone and gets thoughtful upon noticing a very strange detail in the previous fight video. He finds it bizarre that Wolfgang didn't even flinch when attacked by a hunter with constellation power without having a signature. As he observes the image of the barbarian on his screen, Junhwan begins considering the idea of testing that man's true strength. He thoughtfully analyzes the situation to find out if Wolfgang is truly a legendary warrior or just an ordinary person with no real value. A few days later, Wolfgang walks calmly across the pedestrian crosswalk in the middle of the city with his massive sword strapped to his back. The barbarian looks at the traffic light and thinks local traffic rules are excessive and that the king of this place oppresses the people too. Much he watches the green light and tries to remember the complicated instructions he received to successfully cross streets without messing up. At that moment, Yeren spots the giant amidst the crowd and cheerfully waves, calling out his name to show where she is. She asks if he had trouble finding his way, and Wolfgang replies that he followed the doctor's clear directions before they headed in. Yeren opens the office door announcing their arrival to Dr. Choi, who quickly turns around to welcome them warmly. The specialist apologizes for the inconvenience of having them come over and suggests everyone head straight to the storage room first. Dr. Choi gets fascinated touching the giant sword, and Wolfgang whispers to Yeren asking why the man is acting like that. Yeren calmly explains he's acting this way because he's an archaeologist standing before a major historical discovery. The barbarian says he brought his old clothes and warns that Fenrir's pelt is valuable, leaving the doctor shocked to hear that legendary name. They finally enter the large storage room, which is packed with metal shelving units and storage bins on all sides. The doctor introduces Wolfgang to his assistants on site, and the young staff members are impressed to see the man from the statue in person. The young female assistant stares at the massive barbarian up close and thinks, impressed, that he looks even bigger in real life than as a statue. The young hunter extends her hand to Wolfgang and introduces herself as Kang Jiho, an A-rank archaeological hunter, finding it surreal to meet a living relic. The barbarian shakes her hand and formally introduces himself as Wolfgang the Crepe, maintaining his steady posture as always while carrying his giant sword. Next, Jiho introduces her young assistant named Choi Jung-hyun, who greets Wolfgang politely with a friendly smile on his face. Yeren pops up right behind the barbarian and greets the archaeologist cheerfully, and Jiho reacts enthusiastically. Seeing it's been a while since the two last met, the young assistant gets fascinated looking at Wolfgang's weapon and enthusiastically asks if that colossal sword also woke up alongside him. The barbarian explains that the sword was passed down through generations to the chiefs of his tribe, and Dr. Choi claps his hands in surprise upon understanding the weapon's importance. Jiho says they arrived at a good time, as there's a mysterious relic in the lab that's been keeping them up at night. Inviting the barbarian to take a look, Wolfgang asks in a low tone to Yeren if archaeologists are always this energetic, and she smiles, explaining they are just really excited. The archaeologist displays a huge ancient weapon inside a glass display case and explains they found it in the same cave where Wolfgang was as a statue. Jiho asks if he knows the object, explaining that the other relics were ordinary, but that weapon refused any attempt at analysis. Wolfgang looks at the weapon and starts remembering Jonas, the son of Louis, who lived right near the entrance of his old village in the past. The warrior reveals that Jonas was a brave man who fought him for the leadership of his tribe and was also his trusted best friend. He continues, saying that right after the start of the holy war against the demons, his friend fought bravely and ended up meeting a glorious death in combat. The barbarian touches the glass with a trembling hand and reveals that weapon belonged to Jonas, but later also became his own battle armament. He recalls carrying his friend's weapon across the battlefield, and that with it he managed to defeat tens of thousands of cruel demons in the past. Yeren listens to the whole explanation in silence and gets thoughtful upon understanding the sad and grand history behind that war relic. Wolfgang says with determination that he needs to find by any means necessary the demon responsible for taking the life of his dear friend Jonas. Yeren gently holds Wolfgang's hand and affectionately asks him not to try carrying the entire weight of this painful burden alone. She smiles warmly and reminds him that now he has companions by his side, guaranteeing that everyone will help him work through this situation together. The young woman promises she will also do her best to investigate the case and asks him to stay strong, and Wolfgang thanks her for her support from the heart. Jiho apologizes for bringing up painful memories unintentionally, but the barbarian says not to worry, since thanks to her he found his friend's weapon. Wolfgang asks if this helped her research, and the archaeologist happily confirms that knowing the item is linked to him will make everything easier moving forward. Suddenly, the barbarian goes on high alert and asks her to wait a second, locking his eyes on another mysterious object sitting on the table. He steps up surprised to the table and points directly at an ancient stone arrowhead displaying a very intense bluish glow. Wolfgang clenches his fist tightly and moves rapidly toward the ancient relic, releasing a massive amount of energy around himself. Jiho screams desperately for him to stop, explaining that the object has a strong anti-theft barrier and cannot be removed from there under any circumstances. Yeren asks, frightened, why he's doing that so suddenly, while the barbarian forces the barrier, wondering about the origin of that energy using only his colossal brute strength. Wolfgang breaks the security lock and completely shatters the heavy protective barrier surrounding the item. The barbarian hero screams furiously upon confirming his suspicions about the dark energy infused in the tip of that small stone weapon. At that moment, he remembers being struck by several black arrows in his chest during a terrible decisive battle in the past. The barbarian recalls that the terrible demon devil house stood before him alongside a giant wolf. While he tried to withstand severe injuries, Wolfgang shatters the lab's protective glass display case completely with a powerful punch, leaving the researchers in utter shock at the scene. The barbarian holds the arrowhead firmly in his hand, which begins releasing purple smoke of pure, dark, and dangerous magic on all sides. With a look of pure hatred and fury stamped across his scarred face, Wolfgang mutters the name of his worst enemy, the terrible demon Devil House. Later, with the relic kept in a secure jar, Yeren observes the object thoughtfully and asks whose that strange, dark stain on it might be. The barbarian explains that the stain is his own blood and reveals he can feel the holy energy of the angel with whom he made a contract in the past. Jiho types on her laptop and confirms that the dark energy on the weapon belongs to Devil House, understanding why it was impossible to analyze the item before the archaeologist gets his attention, saying it was dangerous, as everyone could have been hurt if the barrier exploded, and Wolfgang apologizes for the impulse. Jiho says it's okay, and comments relieved that thanks to his bold action, they managed to get valuable answers for the research. She explains she already imagined the large weapon couldn't be analyzed due to being a holy relic, but admits she never expected that from the arrow. The archaeologist laments not realizing the hidden magic in the relic sooner and comments that everything would have been easier if they had hired a demon hunter. She explains that magic and holy power use mana, making it hard to tell them apart without being a specialized hunter, something even she, as an A rank, hadn't considered. Wolfgang clarifies that he doesn't know a method of telling them apart, but reveals that a demon's aura is distinct and that he learned to recognize it in battle. Jiho slams the table annoyed and complains about the association for not providing a demon hunter, leaving Dr. Choi quite startled by the reaction. The young archaeologist angrily asks her colleague if she was wrong in her complaint, while Dr. Choi just quietly puts away the wolf pelt in silence. Suddenly, an idea strikes Jiho, and she thoughtfully repeats to herself the possibility of recruiting a demon hunter. Yeren notices the archaeologist's odd reaction and asks, confused, if there's something wrong with her or if she ended up discovering new information. Jiho surprises everyone by directly suggesting that Wolfgang become an official demon hunter, leaving the barbarian quite confused by the proposal. Yeren explains that the doctor had asked for help investigating Devil House's whereabouts and that in exchange the hero agreed to cooperate with the lab. Jiho explains that as an A-rank hunter, she has access to a larger database than the doctor, but notes that archaeologists only access data on things already discovered. Yeren agrees with the explanation and adds that demon hunters hold special permission to access almost all information about those creatures. She continues explaining that this hunter class is extremely rare, but highlights that an aptitude test shouldn't be hard at all for someone strong like him. Wolfgang gets thoughtful about this demon hunter job and asks curiously how he could go about becoming one in the future. Jiho cheerfully replies that it's quite simple and that he just needs to pass the promotion exam, making Yeren panic and let out a scream of pure dismay on the spot. The archaeologist asks the reason for all that dramatic reaction, and Yeren faceplants on the desk. Complaining that the promotion exam is precisely the main issue, Wolfgang gets confused and asks the reason for so much concern, and Jiho explains that the association's promotion exam won't be held for a long time. The doctor mentions he heard rumors that Leonidas' spear used in the test was damaged, preventing new exams until they find another holy relic up to par. Slumped with her head on the desk dejectedly, Yeren laments that without the promotion exam taking place, it will be impossible for the barbarian to get his license. Jiho apologizes for throwing cold water on their plan, but soon the assistant cuts into the conversation, reminding them there is a viable alternative in this case. Hearing that there is another path to achieve the goal, Yeren and Wolfgang sit up quickly in the office, eyes wide in surprise. The assistant explains that there is another method to get the license without needing to go through the promotion test, leaving the doctor quite curious about the matter. Young Choi Jung-hyun reveals as cool as a cucumber that the only remaining alternative for the barbarian hero is to enroll directly in the academy. The assistant explains again that to obtain a demon hunter license, there is another path besides the exam, and the doctor asks what that option would be. He details that reliable institutions can grant special licenses for rare classes, and the girls get excited. While Wolfgang listens to everything quietly, Yeren worries, asking if most of the students there aren't teenagers, but Jiho reassures her partner, saying there are also 20-year-olds. Taking advantage of the topic about the student's age, Jiho asks curiously how old the warrior was before ending up as a stone statue. The Barbarian solemnly replies that the 4 seasons of the year passed exactly 33 times since the day he was born in that ancient world. Everyone in the office is shocked to learn he is only 33 years old, and Jiho realizes surprised that she is actually older than the big guy. Yeren explains to the Barbarian the meaning of the respectful term and says that since Jiho is 3 years older than him, calling her that way is the proper thing to do. The warrior understands the social rules of the modern era and agrees to call the hunter Jiho Nuna from that moment on. Accepting local customs, Jiho gets extremely annoyed and embarrassed by his line, shouting for him to never call her that way again with that old man face he has. Meanwhile, in the building hallway, one hunter notifies another that the dungeon schedule will be sent via text and asks him to wait at the agreed location. Junhwan walks down the hallway satisfied with finishing another workday early and starts planning what to do with the free time he just gained today. Suddenly, the man stops walking in the middle of the hallway upon noticing a very important detail and decides to check something on his phone. Real quick, Junhwan approaches the door to room number 305, which displays a sign with the name Wolfgang the Crepe clearly visible in the building hallway. The man watches the movement of people in the building courtyard while planning a way to test the mysterious rookie's true combat ability. He watches the fight video on his phone again and is impressed by the ease with which the Barbarian pinned 2 opponents without breaking a sweat. Yunwan concludes that the rookie is definitely not an ordinary F-rank hunter and thinks he needs to gauge his true condition to decide what to do with him. He decides he needs to find out if Wolfgang has any hidden weak spot and thinks trading blows would be the ideal way to uncover the whole truth. Out on the city streets, Yeren explains to Wolfgang that she can sign the recommendation for the academy and suggests he switch to Jiho's guild right after graduating. She adds that Jiho promised to pay the penalty fee for terminating the old contract with the agency, and Wolfgang replies that he fully trusts his guide's decisions. The young hunter reinforces that an active guild has a much better chance of finding leads on Devil House than a regular agency, and the warrior agrees. She comments that the only real problem now is coming up with the money to pay the academy's tuition fee, and Wolfgang asks if everything boils down to money. The Barbarian reflects that modern society seems to be a place where one can do absolutely nothing without money, and Yeren agrees that humanity evolved that way. At that moment, Junhwan pops up behind them out of nowhere and says he can pay the hero's academy fee, leaving the young guide quite startled. The hunter smiles in a friendly way and lays down the single condition that the warrior needs to do a small, simple favor for him in exchange for paying the fee. Wolfgang asks if the favor would be landing a full power punch on him, and Yeren tries to warn the hunter that that is a pretty dangerous idea. Junhwan warns not to underestimate him just for doing admin work, revealing he is a C-rank combat hunter who wouldn't go down from an F-rank's punch. Yeren observes the hunter suspiciously and thinks he looks way too weak to be a C-rank combatant, seriously doubting that claim of his. Noticing the young partner's look of suspicion, Junhwan lets out a mocking laugh and says it's a huge mistake to judge people based solely on appearances. The hunter displays a glowing object and firmly claims that upon activating the traits of his contracted constellation, he can stand up even to an A-rank. Yeren thinks he must be bluffing to impress and reflects that it would be a huge stretch to consider him as powerful as a renowned A-rank hunter. She hesitates for a moment and begins to wonder if the hunter has a special reason for acting so low-key. Despite his massive hidden strength, she locks her eyes on Yunhwan's hand and concludes that the glowing object he holds so firmly must be his partner constellation's holy relic. Yeren warns Wolfgang to be extremely careful, seriously explaining that the mysterious object in the man's hand is actually a powerful holy relic. The Barbarian replies that he doesn't turn down another man's request and comments that the opponent should be able to take the punch if he has a relic, leaving Yeren quite surprised. Wolfgang smiles satisfied and admits he got extremely curious to see up close the power the hunter can manifest through that holy object. The warrior clenches his huge fist and asks Yeren to step back a bit from the spot so she doesn't end up getting hit by the blow's heavy draft. With an extremely focused and challenging look, the Barbarian prepares to launch one of his most devastating attacks against his opponent on the city street. Wolfgang commandingly orders the opponent to summon his constellation already, enthusiastically declaring that the decisive battle starts right now. Junhwan agrees to the terms and notes he's ready, gearing up to activate his special power through the mysterious relic. The system sends an alert warning that the constellation named owner of the Sacred Royal Seal responded immediately to Junhwan's call. A massive amount of bluish magic energy begins circulating rapidly around the relic in the hunter's hand. The system alerts that the constellation is possessing Junhwan's body, and Yeren is completely shocked upon realizing what is happening there. The young guide is extremely surprised to see the entity possessing the hunter directly and wonders what kind of constellation that could be. Junhwan's appearance begins to shift while the entity's glowing aura merges completely with the hunter's physical body. He transforms entirely, starting to wear traditional historical robes and a classic hat, leaving Yeren jaw-dropped at the change. The girl tries to guess the entity's true identity and reflects on who the legendary guardian of that valuable royal seal might be. She finally realizes the constellation is Park Moon-soo, the famous and respected secret royal inspector from that ancient dynasty of the past. The entity under Yunhwan's control commands them to make way and immediately summons an army of spectral soldiers around Wolfgang. A massive legion of armed ghost warriors appears, right behind Junhwan, surrounding the entire area where the clash of strength will take place. Seeing that large crowd of war spirits, the barbarian ironically asks if the challenge is hitting all of them with a single punch. The possessed hunter tells him not to worry about the spectral soldiers, revealing he summoned them merely to channel the holy energy. He adds that his constellation strictly punishes unfair opponents and guarantees that if Wolfgang is pure and innocent, no harm will come to him. With his usual total calmness and confidence, the warrior accepts the rules of the game and confirms he is ready to land the agreed strike. Wolfgang rushes forward rapidly and connects a devastating, crushing punch against the hunter, who fails to pull off any defensive reaction in time. Seeing the sheer force of the punch coming his way, Junhwan falls into despair and tries screaming uselessly for him to wait, right after the overwhelming impact. Wolfgang merely rests his fist and calmly asks if that amount of strength was enough for the test. The massive legion of spiritual warriors begins dissolving into light particles, while the hero remains completely unscathed in the courtyard. Yeren gets her vision totally obscured by dust and the harsh light of destruction, complaining that she can't see a single thing that happened. The young hunter tries straining her eyes amidst the smoke and dissipated energy to figure out the final result of that bizarre clash. When the ghost warriors vanish completely in a sudden flash, she gets confused, not understanding the reason everything disappeared so fast. Approaching the spot, she finds Wolfgang standing, staring at Junhwan, who is already totally defeated and lying unconscious on the ground. The girl runs toward the barbarian hero and worriedly asks if he's okay or injured, and Wolfgang calmly replies he's doing great. The barbarian comments he's more worried about the opponent's state than his own, and Yeren panics, asking if the hunter died lying on the ground and coughing heavily from the impact. Junhwan painfully mutters that the fight's outcome wasn't quite what he had in mind. Wolfgang confirms he's still alive despite his miserable state and questions if the academy tuition fee is finally settled. Yeren presses the fallen hunter, saying he can't forget to pay the fee, and orders him to show up on the academy steps on Monday. She shouts, reiterating that he must not forget to fulfill the agreement under any circumstances. While Junhwan remains motionless and defeated on the asphalt, Junhwan sits up with difficulty on the ground and sighs in relief upon confirming in his thoughts that he felt no dark energy coming from the barbarian. The hunter reflects that a man with that level of strength is no ordinary hunter and is impressed at being hit even under the protection of his entity. With a serious and deeply intrigued look, he concludes that such a feat would be completely impossible to perform. For an F-rank, Junhwan watches the pair walk off into the horizon during sunset and ponders who that mysterious warrior Wolfgang really is. He remains thoughtful, considering the possibility that the barbarian might actually be a powerful constellation, or even a being of a far superior rank elsewhere. An extremely muscular man named Kim Jin-woo stretches his arms and mentally gears up to start a tough training session. He positions himself in front of a large metal testing panel on the wall, focusing his strength and breathing to perform the impact test. Jin-woo gathers a massive amount of energy into his tattooed fist, which begins emanating an extremely bright, hot bluish flame. With a shout of fury and determination, the fighter charges all out, launching an extremely powerful, focused punch toward the testing target. The punch's impact releases a devastating blast of bluish power that cracks the armored panel on the wall, throwing up dust and concrete chunks. The man is left winded and sweaty after the immense physical effort, anxiously awaiting his attack's result to show up on the digital screen. The device's display begins blinking steadily, preparing to show the exact score reached by the fighter's physical strength. The screen displays the mark of 2,127 points, and the youth celebrates super enthusiastically upon realizing his power keeps growing. A few days later, in the morning, we see a colossal staircase surrounded by lush green trees leading straight to the academy's main entrance. Wolfgang marches up the stairs, rushing the others, while Junhwan crawls step by step, exhausted, complaining that he's already doing his best. Yaron looks back suspiciously and warns that if he's faking fatigue to avoid paying their tuition, that cheap trick won't work. The guy protests, saying it's not about money, explaining that the extreme weakness stems from the possession suffered in the fight days ago in the office. The staff member explains that the low-rank hunter exam was moved there following the incident with the destroyed relic. The staff member explains to the pair that the admission process can be done on the spot if they already hold a registered hunter license. The man shows the recommendation letter from Seoul and explains that since the Barbarian is F rank, he will be placed in Class F and can rank up by taking tests. Yaron smiles relieved and thinks they got super lucky to get the spot precisely thanks to the holy relic that Wolfgang himself had broken. Yaron asks the staff member if it's true the academy can issue demon hunter licenses directly, leaving the man quite intrigued. The staff member confirms with a smile that it is possible and reveals that the professor in charge of that specialized track is the renowned Kim Seong-cheol. The young hunter gets thoughtful hearing the name of Professor Kim Seong-cheol, trying to remember if she heard about him in her previous missions. The man explains that the professor is also the Class F tutor and asks the student to follow him to the room while he reviews all the paperwork. The staff member asks Yaron's dad to wait while he reviews everything, leaving the girl in a panic over him thinking Wolfgang is her father. Yaron tries to clear up the huge misunderstanding and awkwardly explains to the man that the actual student is actually the big guy beside her. The staff member awkwardly apologizes for the embarrassing mistake and comments that he thought her dad had just discovered he was a monster hunter. Junhwan politely cuts into the conversation and asks who he should talk to in order to settle the academy tuition fees. The hunter points out the window and excitedly mentions that the person responsible for handling that financial matter just arrived in the school courtyard. Outside, Junhwan continues winded and exhausted from climbing so many steps, questioning why that school had to be located in the middle of the mountains. The staff member asks Yaron if her dad used to wield any special equipment, and the Barbarian directly answers that he used a sword. Yaron questions if personal weapons are required for Class F groups, and the staff member says specialized classes demand that from all students. She laments in thought for not handing the sword over to Jiho later, but Wolfgang guarantees he can use his weapon whenever he needs it. The girl watches the Barbarian walk off decisively and gets intrigued, unable to grasp the true meaning behind those words of his. Suddenly, a sharp wind noise cuts through the air around the group of hunters, catching the attention of everyone present at the academy entrance. A mysterious man in traditional white robes comes running past them at high speed, making Yaron jump at the movement. The reception staff member shouts upon recognizing the man and calls out to him urgently, revealing he is the famous Professor Kim Seong-cheol of the place. Upon hearing the loud call from the front desk staff, the man in traditional robes abruptly stops his steps and halts in the courtyard. The professor hovers mysteriously above the courtyard floor, turns calmly toward the group, and asks if they were calling him there. The man asks the professor to take a new student to Class F and enthusiastically comments that now they have 2 demon hunter candidates. Yaron plays along with the misunderstanding and playfully tells Wolfgang to follow the professor, calling the big guy dad in front of everyone. She alerts the Barbarian that the moment has come for them to part ways and asks if he'll be okay, and the warrior tells her not to worry. The young guide advises him to use the phone if he needs to and counsels him not to cause trouble at school, especially avoiding hitting people. Yaron shouts from afar with determination, reinforcing the request for him to behave and not cause any kind of trouble on his first day of class. The colossal warrior walks with firm steps toward the school building under the watchful and worried gaze of his 2 young travel companions. Yaron watches the Barbarian walk away and timidly hopes he manages to adapt well and doesn't get into any trouble with the other students. Junhwan jokes, saying she looks like a mom sending her kid off to the army, and the girl turns around extremely annoyed to yell at him. The staff member asks if they can settle her kids' accounts, and the girl loses her patience, yelling annoyed that they are not her kids. Walking through the building's inner hallways, Yaron looks at photos on the walls and curiously asks if that place is a sort of hall of fame. The man confirms with a smile and explains that the photos portray the top graduating students of each class, proudly revealing he was part of the 10th. He points to the photo of Kim Jin-seong, the top student of the 10th class, and admits he lost first place due to having slightly less physical strength. Junhwan praises the guy's physical stamina and comments that he is an heir to an influential major family that holds a contract with a strong constellation. The hunter observes his former classmate's portrait with admiration and comments that the youth gave up a comfortable life to become a hunter. Yaren remembers hearing about him and comments that the guy lived worried about not meeting his demanding father's expectations. The young hunter gets thoughtful looking at the photo and starts wondering if Junhwan's classmate faced serious problems with his family. The man explains that being a successful hunter was his family's wish and reflects that the guy's dream was perhaps imposed by his father. Yaren comments surprised that he knows a lot about other people's lives, and Yunhwan replies with a smile that gossiping about others is one of his favorite pastimes. The front desk staff member returns to the hallway holding a folder with important documents and politely thanks them for their patience in waiting. The man asks if Yunhwan is recommending Wolfgang as an industrial-sponsored student from the agency, and the hunter promptly confirms yes. Junhwan asks if students referred by the agency get tuition and monthly fee waivers, and asks to apply the benefit for the new student. Yaren gets confused by the scheme, and Junhwan explains that if he had that much saved up, he would have bought a car instead of paying for school for them. The staff member alerts that to finalize the enrollment process, he will need more documents and invites Junhwan into the office right away. The hunter complains, saying he won't leave her waiting without a car and asks to wait, but Junhwan tells her to just sign the paperwork. Yaren gets thoughtful and reflects that although she is very grateful for the academy fee payment, she still finds it hard to warm up to Junhwan's ways. Setting thoughts about her colleague aside, the young hunter walks thoughtfully down the hallway and focuses her attention on another pending matter. She admits to herself that she is quite intrigued by the fact that the famous hunter Kim Jin-seong disappeared so mysteriously. The girl looks closely at the guy's portrait on the academy wall and wonders about the real reason for his sudden absence in recent times in the office. The staff member alerts Junhwan that it's enrollment period and asks him to wait a moment on the couch while he organizes the papers. Junhwan enters the reception area and decides to politely approach the hooded youth sitting alone, waiting for service in the office. Looking out of the corner of his eye at the mysterious youth's face, Junhwan gets quite thoughtful, feeling like he's seen him somewhere very important in the past. Junhwan widens his eyes in complete shock upon staring up close at the features of the hooded guy sitting in reception. The man points a trembling finger toward the hooded youth and shouts, startled, drawing the attention of everyone present in the place. The hunter shouts Kim Jin-seong's name and questions with total surprise and outrage what he could be doing there in that office. Yaren watches the scene and recalls in her thoughts that the guy was a true prodigy from an influential family and very promising in the past. She wonders for what reason he's been missing for so long and ponders that, despite never having seen him in person, his face isn't totally unfamiliar to her. The young hunter realizes that the guy's facial features resemble, in a mysterious way, someone she had seen previously. Meanwhile, in the hallways, Jinwoo walks annoyed carrying his workout bag and complains that he really didn't want to enter there. The guy complains frustrated over the fact that his specialty had to be of all things demon hunter. Feeling quite dejected about it, Professor Kim Seong-cheol appears silently right behind Jinwoo and asks with a friendly smile what the reason for all that revolt might be. The youth gets startled by the surprise appearance, and the professor introduces himself calmly as Kim Seong-cheol, the tutor for the demon hunter class. The professor smiles warmly and confirms that he must be Kim Jin-woo, the new student who signed up for the demon hunting specialty. He suggests continuing the conversation, and Jinwoo vents, saying the job feels more like sniffer dogs chasing their tails than real fights. The tutor agrees in part, but explains that they also face demons in combat before any other hunter, right as Wolfgang walks in. Upon noticing the arrival of the imposing barbarian hero in the classroom, Jinwoo freezes completely and reacts with extreme surprise and irritation. The youth points enraged at the barbarian and screams, calling him a scoundrel, showing deep hatred pent up against the newcomer. Jinwoo throws his stuff on the floor and runs furiously toward Wolfgang, screaming at the big guy how he dares to show his face to him. The guy screams out of control, saying it was because of the barbarian that he ended up going through so much suffering and humiliation lately. He tries to throw a full-power punch, but Wolfgang blocks the strike easily with one hand, showing zero physical effort. The warrior immobilizes the attacker's arm and slams him violently against the floor with an extremely fast and efficient takedown. The barbarian pins the youth to the floor, holding his tattooed arm firmly. Demonstrating total control over the physical confrontation, Wolfgang asks dismissively if he was also sent by the enemy guild, and recalls that he had already told their boss to come speak in person. Pinned on the ground, the guy screams enraged, telling the barbarian to stop talking nonsense, and orders him to release him from that hold immediately. Professor Kim Seong-cheol decides to step into the student's fight and extends his hand, channeling a glowing yellow energy around both of them. The guy complains in pain, thinking his arm is going to break, while the professor's magic levitates both fighters to halt the physical clash. The barbarian hero floats in the air due to the tutor's power and seriously questions what he thinks he's doing interfering in their dispute. The professor lets out a friendly laugh and comments that he just thought it better to break up their fight before they caused greater damage. He calmly explains that he wouldn't want to lose his new students and reminds them that fighting inside the academy grounds for expulsion. The tutor proposes they settle their differences through official supervised training run by him, aware he couldn't stop them otherwise. On the outdoor stairs, Junhwan talks with his former classmate Kim Jin-seong, who coldly counters, saying he has no reason to answer his questions. Junhwan laments that he continues with the same difficult temper and questions if his family still obstinately pursues that power. The classmate coldly advises the man to give up on that search as his last piece of advice as a friend, leaving Junhwan thoughtful and in total silence. He adds that Junhwan should get rid of that useless royal seal he carries around and can't even use most of the time. Junhwan counters, saying the seal is very useful against those who hold pacts with demons, while the classmate spits on the ground, showing disdain for the reunion. The guy dryly bids farewell, asking that they avoid meeting each other again from now on. Walking back toward the top of the staircase, the hunter melancholically watches the back of his former friend walk away, under the watchful eyes of Yeren, who witnessed everything sitting on the stone steps. Yeren watches the guy walk away and asks, confused about those people's behavior, questioning if that youth really was the famous prodigy. Meanwhile, on the training court, Wolfgang stands frustrated with the professor's order to fight using only the power of his partner Constellation. The professor explains that to track demons, it is essential to master Constellation energy, so the test will serve to evaluate both of their aptitudes. The tutor adds that whoever doesn't master that energy cannot be a demon hunter, justifying that he will use that opportunity to test them both. The barbarian asks what would happen if they fought in a different way, and the tutor replies smiling that they would be transferred classes or even expelled. Jinwoo mocks Wolfgang, calling him an ignorant old man for signing up for the demon hunter class without knowing a basic rule like that. Wolfgang ignores the youth's provocation and asks the professor if absolutely all actions in the fight need to be executed through the constellation. The professor smirks and explains that since today is just an initial test, he will permit other methods as long as there is no direct physical contact. He reminds them that minor injuries are inevitable in training, but seriously warns that neither of them should maim their rival or put their life at risk. The tutor turns to the side politely and asks nicely if student Kim Jinwoo has any questions before they begin the test. Jinwoo focuses his challenging gaze and annoyance-filled warning that he prefers to start the clash of strength right now, releasing a dense purple magic flame around himself. The guy flashes a sneering smile and confesses that his only wish there is to smash that pushy barbarian's face as fast as possible in the fight. He focuses his purple magic energy toward a cart filled with balls and warns the barbarian hero to be very careful with the attack coming his way. The youth floats one of the tennis balls with his dark magic and screams furiously that Wolfgang will pay a very high price for crossing his path. Today he hurls the ball wrapped in a massive, blazing golden flame straight toward Wolfgang, while the professor watches everything with closed eyes. Jinwoo launches a tennis ball wrapped in blazing flames directly toward Wolfgang. The kid asks what the barbarian thought of the technique, mocking that he tried to copy a fireball. Wolfgang looks down at his own singed jacket and comments that his clothes were ruined in a pretty annoying way. Jinwoo tells him to give up if he's complaining and says he might forgive him if he begs on his knees. The professor asks them to talk it out, but Jinwoo complains that he's just stalling and tells his rival to get on his knees already. With his patience at its limit, Wolfgang realizes he's going to have to rough the kid up to get him to listen. The barbarian seriously warns that he will give his rival exactly 1 minute to throw everything he's got. Meanwhile, outside, Junhwan receives a document regarding tuition payments and mentions that they can go. Now the two begin descending the massive staircase located at the entrance of Seoul Academy. Yeren calls Junhwan manager and asks if she can check something with him. She asks if something happened between him and Jin Xiang back in their school days, as she felt a very strange vibe between them. Junhwan smiles and explains that this is just the usual dynamic of rivals who share a love-hate relationship. She is impressed that they stay like that even years after graduating, and he reflects that time doesn't heal everything. Yeren finds the situation pretty complicated, but comments that it didn't seem like they truly hated each other. Suddenly, the girl notices something strange and stops in her tracks in the middle of the stairs. With a shocked expression, Junhwan agrees with her comment, but notices his partner sprinting back up toward the top of the staircase. Jinseong watches the two from afar and thinks that making peace with an old friend really is a tough task. Back at training, Jinwoo taunts his rival, saying he only tried copying a fireball to test him out. Wolfgang locks his serious gaze onto his opponent and repeats that he will give him exactly 1 minute to show his power. The Barbarian challenges the youth to use absolutely everything he is capable of doing. Next, a massive explosion of energy hits the court, kicking up rocks and shattering the ground around them. The professor watches that impressive destruction, completely shocked by what he just witnessed. The tutor runs over to them, annoyed, and asks if Wolfgang didn't cross the line, reminding him of the warning not to go overboard slumped on the ground. Dawn. Jinwoo gets furious upon realizing that his contract with the constellation was completely ruined because of his rival. The professor decides to focus on damage control and tells the Barbarian to pray the kid isn't severely injured. The tutor uses his golden magic to contain the dust and debris caused by the impact of the blow. The smoke slowly begins to settle. Revealing the result of that absurd force, Wolfgang complains that his clothes were completely torn apart and criticizes the terrible quality of those garments. The hero asks for a moment and reaches his arm into a magic portal that opens right in front of him. Wolfgang uses telepathy to ask for a colleague's clothes and his Fenrir pelt cape, scaring the people in the room next door. The Barbarian gets dressed quickly under the surprised gaze of the professor, who merely watches the scene in silence. Wolfgang tosses the Fenrir pelt onto the court floor to gear up for the next move. Jinwoo gets confused, not understanding what kind of bizarre skill that was or what that animal pelt signifies. The warrior squats down on the ground and reveals that there is something that has been bothering him for quite a while. With an intimidating look, he says that the tattoo inked on the guy's arm carries the power of a demon. The Barbarian leaps high into the sky, leaving his opponent completely terrified by the speed Wolfgang comes crashing down onto the ground, generating a devastating impact that makes the earth shake around them. The colossal warrior recovers from the blow while staring down the kid relentlessly. The impact violently shatters the ground, spreading a shockwave that throws Jinwoo backward. The kid holds his own arm while the beast tattoo begins to burn and glow intensely. The professor recognizes what is happening and gets terrified seeing that energy pop up out of nowhere. Jinwoo screams in pain while the demonic mark on his arm burns like red embers. The youth looks up, not understanding the reason for that happening to him at that moment. Before him, a gigantic, dark silhouette begins to manifest right behind Wolfgang's body. Jinwoo falls into despair, seeing that the fearsome Cerberus, guardian of the underworld, is directly linked to the Barbarian. A voice commands him to form a pact with Cerberus to regain his power, holding him accountable for the end of the previous contract. The guy panics at the order to align with a demon, knowing the beast will demand a terrifying price he doesn't want to pay. The voice coldly warns that he has no choice and must make the pact, as otherwise he will pass away. Jinwoo goes into full panic and screams for everyone to run. Terrified by the thought of being devoured by the three-headed monster, Wolfgang covers the guy's mouth to calm him down and firmly warns him not to let fear consume him. Wolfgang tries to reassure the youth, saying no one is going to die today, and explains that the beast only gets stronger if he surrenders to fear. The professor watches from afar and thinks that Cerberus will certainly demand a very high price for the contract, which would be the guy's own life expectancy. The professor laments having already witnessed many souls who made pacts with demons and says he doesn't want to see those tragedies repeat. Wolfgang tells the guy to control his breathing and look straight into the eyes of the demonic creature before him. Jinwoo stammers, saying he can't do it. While the professor begins gathering a strong magic in his hands, Wolfgang alerts that he will show clearly that relying on a demon's power is never the true path to becoming strong. The professor smiles, thinking that both demon hunter candidates are interesting, while Jinwoo gets confused by the pelt his rival threw on the floor. A frightening, glowing aura begins to rise from the wolf pelt, catching the attention of the class tutor himself. The professor and Jinwoo stand completely perplexed, unable to grasp what that glowing blue smoke forming before them is. The legendary wolf Fenrir manifests, saying he felt the shift in the wind and realized it was Wolfgang. While Cerberus's heads back away, terrified, Wolfgang greets the giant wolf and asks if it isn't time to test if his fangs have rusted. While Jinwoo feels his body freeze up, the great wolf stares at the weakened beast and complains that he was summoned after so long just to deal with an opponent who has already lost the will to fight. The Barbarian explains he summoned him to announce a new beginning, as he discovered that demons remain active even in this modern era. Fenrir notes that an entire millennium has passed and observes that the hero remains heavily bound by the chains of his past. The wolf tells the barbarian to handle that creature alone and warns he will return to gather strength and tell their comrades about the hero's return. Jinwoo sits on the ground, unable to believe the wolf actually spoke, and wonders what he just witnessed there. Meanwhile, outside the academy, Yeren comes sprinting back up the stone steps. The girl yells annoyed at the manager to hurry up, complaining that her whole schedule is delayed because of the holdup with settling the accounts. Junhwan suddenly stares at the sky with a confused expression and tries to draw Yeren's attention to something floating in the air. A colossal and very familiar sword appears spinning rapidly high up, flying through the blue sky. Junhwan questions if that giant weapon doesn't look familiar. While on the court, Wolfgang notices it's heading in the right direction. The colossal sword finally emerges flying over the court, and Wolfgang jokes that it takes so long to arrive that it truly lives up to its ancient reputation. The warrior points upward, signaling it has arrived, drawing the attention of the three-headed hound, who begins sweating nervously. The massive colossal sword plunges from the sky and slams violently into the ground of the tennis court. In the professor's office, he calmly explains that forming a contract with a demon isn't illegal and that it sometimes helps hunters track them down. The tutor comments he is curious about his file, recalling that his older brother was very promising and that his father is a renowned businessman and martial artist. The tutor questions why he made a pact with a demon. Given that his wealthy family could easily get relics for a decent contract, Jinwoo sits slouched in the chair and dryly asks if he really needs to answer that kind of personal questioning. The professor replies that as his advisor, he needs to know everything, warning that this type of contract grants a lot of fast power, but charges an unfair price. He exemplifies that the contract made with Cerberus is so dangerous that it demands half of the user's remaining life expectancy, leaving Wolfgang surprised. The barbarian stands up furious and startled, exclaiming that the situation is far more serious than he imagined, upon learning the youth's life is being drained. The guy keeps his head down and vents, asking what it would be like if he were just an unwanted child in his family. He recalls his family's celebration when his older brother managed to forge a pact with the constellation known as descendant of the barbarian Jinwoo, recalls that making a pact with a foreign constellation like that became the main topic of conversation at the time. The youth shares that his family was in such an excellent position that it seemed like only a matter of time before they became the most prestigious lineage in the country. He explains that although his father currently holds a strong businessman image, the big dream of his life was always to be a legendary martial artist. That prestigious pact ended up expanding to the whole family, making it seem like his father's big dream was finally coming true. The guy grows sad, remembering that everyone was celebrating big time, but that things shifted right after Jinwoo shares that he, being the second son, and the disappointment due to lack of talent, caused a mess that led the constellation to sever the family pact. The youth points angrily at Wolfgang and screams that none of that would have happened if it weren't for that cursed barbarian's fault. Wolfgang keeps his arms crossed and calmly questions how that whole family situation could possibly be his fault. In the past, the hero had asked the spirit if he was upset over being referred to merely as a constellation instead of his real name. The constellation spirit explained that the youth had merely acted out of pure ignorance and asked Wolfgang to forgive him for that mistake. The barbarian replied that his punishment was already over when he challenged him and that the rest was a private matter between the two of them. Wolfgang agreed to forgive the youth for that single time, but warned that he was using his power in a completely wrong way. The spiritual entity immediately agreed with the barbarian and revealed he already had plans to take action on that. Wolfgang comments that he never imagined the contract would end up completely broken, but notes that the entity was already doubting that family. Jinwoo screams outraged, saying that's impossible, defending that his older brother was a true genius who didn't deserve to lose the pact. The warrior says he doesn't know his brother well enough to judge, but guarantees that none of them were using the barbarian's power correctly. He concludes by saying it's not a matter of talent, but rather compatibility, concluding that that power was never the right choice for their family. Jinwoo screams in rage, asking how he could possibly be using the wrong power, insisting that his older brother was definitely a genius. Suddenly, the door is kicked open with violent force, and Jin Seong bursts into the room, visibly furious. Jinwoo's eyes widen, and he completely freezes upon seeing his own brother barge in like that. Jin Seong glares at his younger brother with pure hatred and orders the scumbag to get out of there right now. Outside, Yeren runs desperately toward Building F of the academy. The girl rushes in a hurry, warning that it will be a total disaster if Wolfgang causes another riot. While the manager tries to keep up with her, Junhwan almost passes out from sheer exhaustion, bitterly complaining about the endless staircases in the academy. In the outer courtyard, Jin Xiang drags his younger brother by force while the kid cries, apologizing and promising to fix the situation. Jin Woo keeps getting dragged across the courtyard dirt, desperately begging his older brother to stop doing this. An overhead view shows Jin Xiang dragging his brother relentlessly right through the middle of the main courtyard. Jin Xiang violently hurls his younger brother straight onto the lawn, making the boy scream in pain. Lying on the grass, the young man starts crying out of sheer humiliation and pain over the whole degrading situation. Jin Xiang screams at him to stop crying and asks if losing contracts has become some kind of joke, reminding him that he already warned him this would end up costing him everything. The older brother starts kicking Jin Woo furiously, complaining that he worked so hard to get him into the academy and he ruined it all over again. In the hallway, the teacher mentions that they couldn't even talk about Wolfgang because of the chaos, and the Barbarian asks if there is some kind of problem. The tutor answers that the problem is actually massive, and Wolfgang asks to know right away since he needs to become a demon hunter. The professor looks outside through the window and reveals with a smirk that the situation is actually the exact opposite of that. The professor recalls the moment of the fight in the court, when Jin Woo was taunting the Barbarian, demanding he get on his knees if he couldn't win. Wolfgang asks if the tutor already knew everything from that point on, and the man confirms he had his doubts, but got absolute proof right there. The tutor proudly states that when it comes to using a constellation's abilities, he is far superior to any active demon hunter. He admits that even with his high skill, it took him a long time to detect the presence of demonic energy around Jin Woo. The professor says that even though he felt the evil force, he only realized it belonged to Cerberus after the entity left the boy's body. He adds that there was spatial distortion and a series of other unusual phenomena during the clash. The man also mentions the high-level summoning magic used by the colossal warrior. He finishes by stating that even a telekinesis-like ability was used to pull the giant sword back. The professor grins and questions why Wolfgang enrolled in the academy in the first place, since he has never seen a hunter use so many varied techniques with such ease. The Barbarian stares at the instructor seriously and asks directly what conclusion he drew from all of this. The tutor suggests that the Barbarian take the promotion exam and skip ranks, since regular academy classes have nothing left to teach him. The professor starts talking about a regret, but Wolfgang suddenly places his hand on his shoulder and tells him to hold on outside. Jin Xiang continues to beat his brother mercilessly for wrecking all the effort it took to put him in school. Yeren finally arrives running to the scene and tries to step in, screaming to know what the guy thinks he's doing. The girl steps in front of the beaten boy and furiously questions why he is hitting his brother like that. Jin Xiang glares at the girl with annoyance and tells her to get out of the way, asking who she thinks she is to step into their fight. Junhwan holds his former friend from behind, begging him to stop before he ends up taking the kid's life, while Jin Xiang screams at the manager to let go of him. Junhwan asks him to calm down and wonders what happened to his personality, getting an angry reply that it's none of his business. Jin Xiang raises his arm in a rage to throw a punch, complaining that if he doesn't do this, the kid will end up getting taken out anyway. Suddenly, the young attacker is interrupted by a hard slap that strikes his face with force. Everyone around stands in absolute shock after witnessing that sudden, aggressive action right in the middle of the courtyard. The professor restrains Jin Xiang's arm and coldly warns him that hunters aren't allowed to fight outside dungeons and that he could get expelled. The tutor puts on a dark, serious face, warning that there is something far more important to deal with. With a terrifying smile, the master complains that the young man dragged his student away right in front of him without even asking for permission. The professor firmly advises the guy to stop the assault immediately if he doesn't want to face the consequences. With his eyes glowing a menacing shade of orange, he warns that he can easily make room for a real fight right here against him. Jin Xiang steps back in surprise and tension, asking if the tutor really referred to the boy as his official student. He recalls that the younger brother doesn't even have an active contract with a constellation yet, and asks if he will really be accepted into the academy. The professor calmly replies that having an active contract or not is a completely different matter from the fact that the boy has been accepted as his student. Jin Xiang stares at the professor with a serious, thoughtful look after hearing that firm statement from the experienced master. The tutor holds his gaze serenely, showing absolute authority and confidence in his decision to protect the student. Jin Xiang starts walking away and quietly asks the master to please allow his younger brother's enrollment. The guy walks toward the academy exit all by himself, leaving behind all the chaos in the courtyard. Inside Building F's infirmary, the professor explains to Yeren that the academy's magical barriers carry fast healing spells for minor injuries. The master sighs and pensively remarks that Jin Woo's real issue right now might actually be the pain in his heart. Yeren agrees, figuring the boy's pain is connected to his older brother, Jin Seong, and wonders what could have happened between them. The professor takes a calm breath and prepares to explain a bit of the past history between the two brothers. Jin Woo is seen remembering the moment he shouted in outrage that his brother was a genius and that he should have been the one to lose his contract instead. The kid insisted furiously that he didn't understand what the barbarian meant by using power incorrectly. Praising his brother's brilliance, Jin Seong remembers his conversation with the professor, asking how he could take in his younger brother when he didn't even have an active pact with an entity. In that very same conversation, the older brother ended up giving in and humbly begging for the kid's admission into the Hunter Academy. The professor calmly concludes that there are very complex and personal family circumstances that only the two brothers truly understand. Wolfgang opens the infirmary door to say goodbye, briefly letting the tutor and Yeren know that he is heading out. Yeren asks if he collected Cerberus's body, and the barbarian confirms it, telling her not to touch the bag because of the dead beast's bad energy. In the parking lot at sundown, Junhwan scolds Jin Seong for the assault, saying that picking a fight in the academy courtyard was extremely reckless. The manager reminds him that the kid he beat up is his own blood brother, but Jin Seong coldly fires back that it's a family matter. Junhwan asks if this sudden change has anything to do with his recent disappearance, but the guy tells him not to jump to conclusions. The manager counters by asking what possible excuse justifies beating your own brother, questioning his real motives behind that secret investigation. Without offering any more explanations, Jin Seong gets into his car and revs the engine, leaving Junhwan standing alone in the parking lot in deep thought. During the drive, Jin Seong remembers being asked why he stopped looking into their father, answering that it was because he left the association. He recalls that the Hunter Association already knew their father had gotten directly involved with that dark power. Junhwan had admitted to leaving out details from the official report to keep the Hunter Association from finding out and getting angry. Leaving out those details protected the secret that their father was actually using the forbidden energy of a demon. Jin Seong realized his friend ended up not turning in the full report in the end just to shield him from bigger trouble. The guy wondered if he should be grateful for that favor, or if he should hold a grudge over the harsh consequences of that choice back in the present. The manager silently watches his former friend's car fade down the road under the glow of the setting sun. Night falls over the impressive storefront of the Archaeology Hunter Association building. Inside the association, the assistant holds the mysterious bag and asks in shock if the barbarian really intends to craft armor out of the monster. Wolfgang takes a sip of soda and confirms that he wants a recommendation for a skilled blacksmith to forge the gear. The assistant scratches his head, thoughtfully, trying to decide how to start explaining the gear market to the barbarian. He explains that nowadays nobody goes straight to a blacksmith, advising him to sell Cerberus's remains to the association and just buy pre-made armor. Yeren asks the assistant to take a photo of the materials and list them, mentioning that she doesn't use the marketplace much herself because of the high fees. The guy agrees to list the item in the system, provided Yeren promises to help him with his hunting research later on. The assistant asks what kind of armor they're going to buy with the sale money, and Wolfgang surprises them by saying the cash isn't for him. The two helpers stare at the barbarian with utterly confused looks, having no idea who that money would even be for in the corporate office. An important executive is informed by his secretary that Cerberus's carcass has been listed and that Jin Woo hasn't returned from class. The company president glares sternly at the assistant and asks in surprise why his youngest son hasn't come back yet. The secretary explains that the boy lost the monster in a fight against some guy named Wolfgang, got beaten up by his own older brother, and ended up hospitalized. Annoyed by the news about Wolfgang, the patriarch dryly orders them to hire a professional cleaner to handle the situation in total secrecy. Turning his back to the secretary, he reflects and concludes that to keep Jin Seong's mind stable, they'll have to keep Jin Woo alive somehow. The businessman orders his youngest son to be brought back home right away, stating that he will decide the boy's punishment himself. Right at that moment, Jin Seong appears standing at the office door and asks his father to wait before taking any action. The father turns around asking how long he's been listening, and the young man stammers, saying he just walked up. The patriarch tells him he doesn't need to play dumb, and the guy simply bows his head low, apologizing to his father. With an ambitious, terrifying look, the father assures him that the individual will awaken soon, granting ultimate power to their family. The young man listens to that chilling claim with sweat breaking out on his face, visibly terrified by his father's words. Lacking the strength to argue against the patriarch's plans, the guy excuses himself and quickly exits the massive luxury office. The president turns to his trusted secretary and orders him to closely track every single step Jin Seong takes from now on. Back at the Hunter Academy infirmary, young Jin Woo lets out a heavy, disheartened sigh while staring blankly at the ceiling. He remembers the day his older brother handed him a mysterious piece of paper featuring a drawing of Cerberus's mark Jin Seong had commanded the boy to tattoo that design onto his body so he could form the forbidden pact with the demon he advised, accepting whatever conditions the demon demanded, promising that it would easily turn him into a C-rank hunter. Back then, the younger brother cried, refusing to make the unholy pact with the beast, but the older brother coldly insisted he had to do it right. That second, Jin Seong kept stressing that the boy would end up dead if he didn't, warning him about their father's ruthless rage. He explained that their father wouldn't hesitate to eliminate them, and that the demonic pact was the only guaranteed way to keep him breathing. The guy explained that their father was aiming to awaken a massive force, and that they'd soon hold power. The association couldn't possibly ignore. Jinwoo begged his brother to talk to his contact at the Hunter Association and stop their father, fearing he would lose half his lifespan to the pact. Hanging his head in deep anguish, the older brother painfully confessed that he simply couldn't do anything to help him out. With tears streaming down his face, Jin Song admitted that his childhood friend would definitely end up dead if he tried to interfere. He begged his younger brother to just follow orders, claiming it was the only way to keep everyone alive. Back in the present, in the infirmary, Jinwoo quietly weeps as he recalls that painful, unforgettable conversation with his brother. Suddenly, a magical portal opens out of thin air, and a hand shockingly reaches right through the dimensional tear. Jinwoo freaks out and screams in terror. Thinking he's witnessing a ghost appearing in his room, Wolfgang drags the young guy back through the portal while telling him not to fight it, triggering frantic protests from the terrified boy. Outside under the cover of night, Jin Xiang walks up the academy stairs wearing a hood and mask. He hurries up the steps, knowing he has to move extremely fast before his father's ruthless plans get set into motion. In the faculty room, Professor Seong Cheol stretches in his office chair and calmly remarks that the time has finally come. Jin Xiang moves swiftly and stealthily down the institution's quiet hallways. The professor senses the intruder's presence and wonders with intrigue what Jin Xiang's real motives are for being there at this hour. The masked guy enters the empty infirmary and carefully scans the room, seeing no sign of movement nearby. He checks the space cautiously, trying to make sure this is actually the right room where his brother was staying. Wasting no time, the guy steps forward and yanks the curtain of one of the hospital beds back. As he pulls the curtain, he finds the bed completely empty and is stunned to realize his brother has disappeared. Frustrated by the ruin of his plan, he wonders where the kid could have gone, having never anticipated his absence. Suddenly, a brilliant aura of golden magic surrounds Jin Xiang's body, causing him to levitate in the air, completely panicked. The professor calmly steps into the room, confirming his suspicions as he reveals the guy's true identity beneath the mask. The master peacefully commands the young man to come with him silently to avoid causing another unnecessary scene. In another room, Jinwoo is cowering on the floor, screaming in terror as he asks who the Barbarian is and why he keeps coming closer. Wolfgang announces that he'll make the boy his first follower and tells him to strip so he can take his measurements, leaving him bewildered. The hero promises to convince the constellation to take the kid back if he proves he's qualified and stays away from demons. Jinwoo's eyes widen with a tiny spark of hope as he asks if he can really restore his sacred pact. The warrior says he can't give an absolute guarantee, but assures him that if he becomes a worthy warrior, there will be a good reason for it. The boy stares at the imposing warrior, completely frozen, processing that unexpected offer that could rewrite his life. Jinwoo cracks a faint smile and lets out a soft laugh, realizing he finally has a real shot at redemption. The boy drops to his knees crying and begs the barbarian to teach him the way, asking what kind of warrior he needs to become. Wolfgang assumes a stern, powerful stance, declaring that from this moment on, he will be reborn as the ultimate shield warrior. The young man stammers in confusion, not quite getting the meaning or point of becoming a shield warrior. The assistant mentions that he's taken all the measurements and says now they just need to find the right gear for the new warrior. Wolfgang stresses that the main priority is getting a massive shield that fits his body size perfectly. The guy happily shares that they've already received a buy offer for Cerberus's carcass, saying they can craft the shield with that money. The hero suggests taking a look at the actual item right away, leaving Yeren surprised by his sudden rush. Lugging the heavy load on his back, the younger brother nervously wonders who could have bought the beast's remains on the market. The guy quietly prays that his strict father isn't the buyer behind that mystery transaction. As they walk, Yeren checks her phone in surprise and mentions she just got a text from Professor Seong Cheol. Back in the academy office, the veteran master lightly sets his phone down on the desk. The experienced professor looks at the young man standing before him and calmly commands him to tell the whole truth right now. The tutor asks if he went after the demon mark again and questions if he has any idea what a terrifying price his younger brother would pay. Noticing the guy's tense silence, the instructor concludes that refusing to answer might actually be his best move right now. The professor offers to help him escape if necessary, but Jin Seong declines, stating that not even the tutor could handle what's coming. The master reveals he knows the kid is with the archaeology hunters, but warns he won't allow Jinwoo back into his classes. Overcome by surprise and outrage, the guy angrily questions the reason for that sudden shift in his advisor's decision. The master strictly argues that demon hunters must be prepared to die and that he won't tolerate anyone using the academy as a hideout. The instructor says he might lend a hand, but demands a clear, complete explanation of what is truly going on between the brothers. Jin Seong explains that his father, despite being a master martial artist, was never chosen by a constellation in the past. The young man vents that in this current era of hunters, his billionaire father realized there are certain things all the money in the world can't buy. He pulls out an invitation envelope for a high society event, lamenting that after his contract broke, he was asked not to attend. The guy stares at the advisor sternly, warning that his father is definitely not the type to accept defeat and sit around doing nothing. The veteran master instantly catches on, deducing that the patriarch made a dangerous pact with a top-tier demon. Jin Seong claims that neither of them could stop his father alone, noting that only the Hunter Association has enough power to step in. The master understands the situation, but questions why Jin Seong had to push his younger brother Jin Woo so ruthlessly to the extreme. The guy confesses that his father has already been taken over by the demon, and Jin Woo's pact with Cerberus was the only way to prevent the patriarch from killing the kid. He explains that he had to beat his own brother in the courtyard just to fake a punishment and keep their cruel father from stepping in personally. However, the guy reveals with anguish that the plan failed because his father ended up hiring the dread professional cleaner. The master slaps the desk in shock upon hearing about the cleaner, remembering that it refers to a terrifying criminal syndicate operating at an A-rank power level. Jin Seong confirms the facts with his head low, warning that not even the powerful advisor could face that threat on his own. The young man says he'll take whatever blame comes his way, but maintains he acted the best way he could to save his little brother's life at that moment. The master sits back down in his chair, utterly defeated, admitting that in the face of this terrible truth, things are truly out of his control. Jin Seong deeply regrets what happened, thinking none of this would have occurred if he still held his sacred contract. The guy concludes that even if Jin Woo made mistakes, he could never just stand by and watch his father hurt his younger brother. The young man looks at the master with resolve, promising he will put a permanent end to this terrible family situation, no matter the cost. The next day, sunlight beams over the sprawling city. Marking the start of a brand new journey, Jin Woo appears with a visibly exhausted, gloomy expression, still processing the recent chaos. The assistant shows off the new shield forged from the acquired resources, praising the metal piece's lightweight build and high durability. Wolfgang snatches the shield midair and praises the craftsmanship as well, commenting that a light, durable piece is ideal for a first run. Jinwoo glares at the gear with disdain, complaining that shields aren't cool and mentioning he'd prefer flashy weapons like swords or spears. The barbarian looks at the kid seriously, warning him that he needs to know his limits when facing real demons. He explains that focusing on defense ensures survival in combat, but the young man gets annoyed, asking if the barbarian thinks he's too weak. The hero answers without missing a beat that he does, explaining that the boy simply doesn't know how to unleash and control his true potential. The barbarian thinks back to the clash in the classroom, admitting that the boy's physical strikes carry decent power. He warns that ordinary hits won't down demons, and that the kid needs to learn to channel his body's energy at the exact moment of impact. The warrior says that if the kid knew how to do that, he wouldn't have been pinned down so easily, nor would he have needed to resort to dark pacts. Jinwoo stares down at the massive metal shield in his hands, staying completely silent as he deeply reflects on the barbarian's lesson. The scene shifts to the ultra-luxurious mansion belonging to the boy's father, influential businessman Kim Tae-gwan. A dark, eerie atmosphere grips the pitch-black basement located right beneath the family's grand estate. Inside a hidden room, the businessman performs an unholy ritual, slicing his own hand with a sharp blade over a massive metal chalice. Tae-gwan curses furiously at the Hunter Association, swearing he'll become the strongest warrior through his pact with the Demon Lord. Thick blood drips continuously from the president's hand, straight into the crimson liquid filling the sacred vessel. the drop of blood hits the surface of the chalice, creating sinister ripples across that pool of dark energy. A massive magic circle glowing in intense crimson shines brightly on the floor, lighting up the secret chamber with a terrifying aura. Taegwon screams out in a trance, invoking the Great Father of Darkness, offering his own blood as a sacrifice to start the Forbidden Pact. He calls out for the rotten order of light to be shattered, while the sky over the mansion starts turning a terrifying shade of dark. The businessman commands the red skies to part, calling for chaotic forces to descend upon the mortal world. The businessman's henchmen laugh greedily, celebrating that their boss will gain insane power that will help them cash in big time. The president calls out for the entities to consume his own flesh and blood as the ultimate sacrifice of that invocation. He demands the gates of the sealed abyss to open while the blood in the chalice boils and morphs into black slime. With a blast of purple and red lightning, he commands the triumphant descent of the terrifying Lord of Darkness into the chamber. A monstrous, massive silhouette of pure blood and shadows begins to slowly rise from inside the metal chalice. Suddenly, the president's confident look turns to pure terror, and he lets out a desperate scream as he realizes something has gone horribly wrong. The beast formed of shadows and blood lunges mercilessly, swallowing the president's body in the blink of an eye. The man's eye widens, veins bursting, as he chokes desperately against the relentless demon power. Witnessing that scene of pure horror, the two henchmen back away in a cold sweat, screaming in panic for the beast to stop. The monster spreads out like boiling blood tentacles across the stone floor of the chamber, unleashing more screams of panic. From the depths of the ritual, the colossal, terrifying demon lord bound by heavy chains finally manifests completely in the room. Two men in suits stand in utter horror in the basement, and one screams out for the president as he witnesses that terrifying scene. A look of pure terror takes center stage as drops of thick blood fly through the air during the violent ritual. The dreadful red-skinned demon with glowing eyes fully manifests in the chamber, wrapped in heavy chains. The colossal creature towers over one of the terrified subordinates, controlling floating, lethal chains in the dark. One of the employees breaks into a cold sweat, eyes wide with fear, calling out to his partner with a shaky, desperate voice. The demon snaps open its massive, hungry maw lined with sharp teeth, ready to devour yet another victim of that unholy pact. The monster lifts the bloody body of a helpless woman into the air, spreading a crimson aura of death across the whole room. The demon's red eye glows with pure malice as it absorbs the vital energy of that grim blood, offering Taegwon attempts to fight off the possession, screaming out for his secretary, panicked as his own body acts on its own. The businessman's tragic voice echoes inside Jinxiang's mind, desperately begging him to call someone to put an end to this. The man keeps crying out for them to fetch his son, or anyone strong enough to put a permanent stop to the slaughter. He begs with his last bit of strength for them to stop him right now, while he can still cling to a shred of consciousness. A massive blood moon glows sinistically in the city sky. While a thundering noise echoes all around, Professor Kim Seong-cheol shouts out in confusion, unable to understand what's happening. While Jin Seong fears the absolute worst, Jin Seong walks with his head hung low through the dark streets, feeling a heavy dread about what lies ahead. Out of nowhere, the secretary frantically calls Jin Seong, screaming that a massive emergency is unfolding. The young guy listens in shock as he hears that his father finally did what they feared most, leaving him completely shaken by the call. In the Archaeology Hunter Association basement, Wolfgang watches Jin Woo train with his new shield. Jin Woo complains about the makeshift training spot, but the master explains they don't have a dedicated arena for combat. Wolfgang tells the boy to settle down, explaining that he easily loses his balance in battle because he gets overly hyped. The Barbarian demonstrates how that bad stance leaves the kid totally wide open to a fast counterattack from an opponent. The veteran warrior decides to run a practical test, warning the young hunter that he's going to throw a strike his way. Jin Woo sets his stance with resolve, holding up his heavy metal shield to block the incoming attack. Wolfgang tells the kid to keep his stance rock solid and charges forward, throwing a direct punch right at the boy's defense. The impact of that punch is so monstrous it shatters the surrounding crates, leaving Yeren terrified by the sheer force of the blow. Jin Woo grits his teeth and lets out a cry of pain, struggling to absorb the devastating impact of Wolfgang's fist. The crushing force of the hit drags the kid backward all the way across the room, kicking up a massive cloud of dust and debris. The blinding glare of the collision fills the whole space, highlighting the massive power gap between the two fighters. Jinwoo is left completely drained, angrily asking if the barbarian actually considers that destructive punch a light tap. Wolfgang pops his knuckles and compliments the kid for staying on his feet, joking that he only gave him a soft defensive poke. The younger brother stays dead silent while Yeren stares at the massive wreck their sparring made of the room. The barbarian tells him to lock that physical feeling into memory and walks off. Leaving the young man reflecting deeply on his own progress, Yeren remarks that the giant is shockingly serious when he's working, and Wolfgang praises the kid's high test score on the exam. Wolfgang casually recalls how the test facility shattered the moment he put a little power into it, leaving the guide speechless. Suddenly, Jinwoo's phone starts buzzing violently on the work table, grabbing everyone's attention. The boy picks up the call quickly, unaware of the grim news he's about to receive. Wolfgang grumbles that the boy's defensive stance caved in instantly, while Yeren tries to calm the master's temper down. Jinwoo screams into the phone in terror at what he just heard, putting his companions on high alert over his wild reaction. The guy rushes out saying he has to hurry back home right now, bolting straight through the basement door. Yeren wonders if something terrible happened to the boy, while Wolfgang admits he's getting a really bad feeling about this. Professor Kim Seong-cheol is left completely horrified upon learning that the president performed the dreaded demon summoning ritual. The master laments the severity of the situation, realizing this isn't just a simple pact with dark entities. The secretary confirms that the boss was still conscious when he fled, suggesting they hurry to try and stop him in time. Jin Seong says he'll handle this alone since it's a family matter, but the professor warns that the ritual has become a public crisis. The young man counters that a report from an influential hunter like the professor is the only way to make the association act quickly. The secretary begs to tag along because his wife is over there, but Jin Seong calms him down, asking him to go fetch more backup instead. Jin Seong sprints with everything he's got through the dark city streets, focused on reaching the ritual site as fast as possible back in the storage area. Wolfgang tells Yeren he senses something really strange in the air and decides he needs to head out too. Yeren teases him, asking if he's just coming up with an excuse to get out of cleaning up the mess, but the barbarian denies it dead seriously. The two watch in shock as sudden darkness engulfs the sky, confused by how it turned to twilight in the middle of the day. Wolfgang narrows his eyes as he picks up a foul, deeply unsettling energy spreading across the area. The barbarian warns that a demon just stepped into this world, leaving Yeren utterly shocked and unable to comprehend how that's possible. Wolfgang questions his partner's disbelief, but she explains that a simple pact is completely different from a demon physically manifesting on Earth. Yeren gets extremely worried, while the veteran warrior warns that the state of the world is about to change drastically from here on out. Wolfgang clenches, his fist tight, deducing that the demons are finally ready to launch a full-scale invasion. A terrifying flash of purple electrical energy splits the dark sky, signaling the end of a long wait over 1,000 years in the making. In the middle of the night, Jin Seong runs frantically through the city streets in a desperate bid to reach the site of the ghastly ritual. The young hunter sprints out of breath, praying in his head that it isn't too late to stop his family's tragedy. The guy finally arrives at the mansion, placing his hand on the heavy metal door handle to head inside. Once and for all, Jin Seong throws the door open and recoils in horror upon seeing a terrifying red light shining intensely from the basement. The stone floor of the hidden chamber begins to split violently, releasing incredibly dangerous beams of crimson energy. A colossal pillar of red flame erupts toward the sky, tearing through the mansion's roof and illuminating the pitch-black night. Jin Seong shields his face from the massive blast of heat, anguish washing over him as he wonders if he arrived too late to save his father. The young hunter's eyes go wide in complete shock as he focuses his sight through the thick smoke and destruction. The guy breaks into a cold sweat, trembling in dread as he tries to process the monstrous silhouette that just revealed itself before him. The massive column of evil energy slices through the clouds beneath the blood moon, catching the attention of every hunter in the city. A giant black spear slams into the cracked basement floor with a violent crash, blowing dust everywhere. Wolfgang gets ready, resting his massive sword over his shoulder, and orders Yeren to get to a safe spot. Immediately, Yeren begs him to be careful, letting him know the association is already on its way, asking the hero not to go overboard. The colossal barbarian warrior stomps the ground with immense power, shattering the stone under his feet to launch himself. Wolfgang leaps heroically straight toward the storm of dust and destruction unleashed by the demonic energy. The barbarian soars through the sky, heading for the beam of red energy, mentally warning the demons that their downfall is at hand. Thick black smoke swallows the whole battlefield, hiding the movements of the colossal dark enemy. On the destroyed basement floor, Jin Seong appears severely injured, gasping for air amidst the thick smoke. The young man screams out in desperation for his father, begging him to regain consciousness and fight off the demon's brutal possession. A massive, heavy iron chain comes shooting out of the dark mist at high speed, lunging straight at the young man. The guy takes a direct hit from the metal attack, letting out a pain-filled scream as he gets hurled back violently. The demon's hand grips the chain while the beast's voice coldly informs him that his father no longer exists inside that body. The ghastly monster slowly stalks toward the fallen hunter, mockingly telling him not to get so worked up. The creature guarantees with a sadistic glint that it will end Jin Seong and his father before slaughtering every last human on Earth. Jin Seong keeps calling out for his father, but the dark entity cruelly repeats that the man has been erased completely. The monster steps even closer to the beaten guy, warning him to accept his fate without holding any grudges. The beast, with crimson eyes, prepares to fulfill its promise of wiping out all of humanity, starting right here with the young hunter. The boy mourns his father's tragic end and begs him to wake up, but the demon scoffs, saying it's foolish to talk to the dead. The demon lord lunges forward with a lethal thrust of its sharp spear aimed at the victim, coldly ordering him to just die already. Jin Seong grabs the chain with both hands, gritting his teeth in stubborn refusal, stating he can't afford to die here. Out of nowhere, a burst of sparks erupts as a powerful warrior steps right in front of the creature's strike. Jin Woo uses his new shield to block the hit to perfection, leaving his older brother totally shocked by the rescue. The younger brother glances back with a comforting smile, letting him know that this time, he'll be the one saving Jin Seong's life far away in a dungeon in China. Rank hunters, Shihao and Yang Yang gear up to wrap up their battle. A giant dragon roars furiously, launching a devastating fire breath straight at the pair of Chinese warriors. Yang Yang raises a glowing magic shield and commands her partner Shihao to take cover behind her defense right away. The scorching breath slams into the protective energy barrier, triggering a massive firestorm that consumes the entire area. Shihao praises his partner's defense upon seeing she held off the flames. Seizing the opening to leap straight at their target, the skilled spearman flies high through the air, passing over the sea of fire to deliver a lethal blow to the dragon's head. Shihao drops down furiously, driving his spear right into the monster's forehead, screaming that it's his turn to end this fight for good. The monster roars in pure agony as it takes the critical hit head-on, crashing defeated onto the dungeon stone floor. The spearman celebrates their major victory, and his partner cheers happily over clearing an A-rank dungeon. The two celebrate playfully in a victory pose, confidently stating that they really are the absolute best duo around. The girl smiles, saying the adults will finally have to acknowledge them, but she's suddenly impaled by a black spear from behind. Yang Yang spits up blood in complete shock, unable to grasp what just happened to her body. Shihao catches his partner as she collapses helplessly, screaming out his dear companion's name in desperation. Suddenly, the spearman gets brutally slashed across the chest by an invisible attack, screaming in rage as he asks who did that. The young warrior spits blood as he hits the ground, lamenting in shock that he couldn't even catch a glimpse of his attacker. The assassin from the cleaner organization stands tall over the defeated bodies of the two hunters, clutching a bloody dagger. The villain reports over the phone that he wiped out the A-rank targets with ease, while his constellation watches unsatisfied. The cleaner checks his phone screen, locking his eyes on Wolfgang's picture as his next official target to eliminate. While Wolfgang runs beneath the chaotic sky, the assassin watches him from a distance, thinking that all this madness will only make his job easier. The villain readies his sharp weapon, figuring that even though Wolfgang is only F rank, he must have something special going for him to hold a contract. The cleaner drops the explosive device from the top of a building, determined to take out the barbarian with a single precise strike. Wolfgang senses the danger just in time and uses his massive sword to swat away the surprise projectile coming his way. The device detonates in midair, releasing a thick cloud of poisonous green gas that completely wraps around the barbarian. Wolfgang coughs from the toxic fumes, while the cleaner casually walks down the stairs, believing his victory is locked in. The assassin mocks the hero, but his constellation panics, desperately commanding him to fall back immediately. The villain gets confused by the divine warning, and his eyes snap wide as he spots Wolfgang's menacing silhouette rising right behind him. Wolfgang delivers a devastating slash against the cleaner, ripping through the villain's chest and sending blood spraying into the air. The assassin coughs up blood in shock, unable to comprehend how the barbarian kept fighting after taking a lethal dose of poison. The giant warns with glowing eyes that he isn't anyone's prey, but rather the only real hunter here, telling the villain to stay out of his way. Back at the family battle, the dreadful demon fires a violent barrage of razor-sharp chains at the Hunter brothers. Jin-woo uses every ounce of his strength to hold off the impact of the chains with his new shield, setting off a shower of sparks. The younger brother asks if his older brother is all right, and Jin-seong replies with difficulty that he doesn't need to worry about him. Jin-woo keeps his stance low, trying to stay composed just like Wolfgang taught him, focused on taking the hits until help arrives. However, the beast lands a brutal kick against the young hunter's defense, breaking his stance and throwing both brothers backward. The two boys crash onto the chamber's cracked floor while the ghastly monster steps forward slowly to finish off its victims. Jin-woo crawls over to his injured brother to shield him, asking in terror what kind of freaky creature that thing even is. Jin-seong breaks into a cold sweat in pure desperation as he looks toward the horizon, unable to figure out where so many monsters are coming from. A massive rift filled with burning lava cracks open in the city ground, acting as a portal for a dark army to pour out. The infernal abyss boils intensely, releasing an unbearable heat wave and toxic fumes across the destroyed area. A colossal, terrifying demon hand grabs the edge of the stone rift, forcing its way out of that pit of eternal fire. Dozens of demons and freaky beasts start marching out of the portal, spreading panic and destruction through the city. Jin-woo trembles in terror seeing the horde of giant monsters, whispering to himself that this whole thing feels like an unreal nightmare. A giant stone golem leads the horde's assault, stomping forward with heavy steps toward the helpless brothers. The young hunter focuses his glowing eyes and tries to gather his strength, remembering that his beloved brother will die if he gives up the fight. The stone golem smashes the ground with a heavy punch, but Jin-woo manages to block the strike with his durable metal shield. The younger brother spits blood and grits his teeth under the massive pressure of the monster's hit, refusing to give up a single inch. The boy pushes himself to the limit to keep a solid stance, while the other beasts start surrounding them from every side. Jin-woo screams at the top of his lungs, set on enduring the pressure until the hunter rescue team gets to the scene. He blocks another crushing strike from the rocky creature, showing impressive growth in his defensive form. With quick footwork, the young man shoves the stone golem back using the rim of his metal shield in a swift counter. Jin-woo hits another slimy demon with a hard bash from his shield, determined to carve a path right through the horde. The boy strikes with precision and manages to push back a few more beasts, showing he absorbed the barbarian's practical lessons well. Suddenly, a purple monster with tentacles and sharp teeth swoops down fast from above to land a dangerous strike. The creature bites down on the young hunter's defense, biting his new shield into pieces with just one violent crunch. Jin-woo stares at the wreckage of his defense in pure panic, but keeps his mind focused on his sacred mission to protect his brother. The purple demon lunges forward, opening its bizarre mouth to swallow the younger brother, who is left completely exposed on the battlefield. But a giant sword falls from the sky, pinning the monster to the cracked ground, saving the boy's life at the very last second. Jin-woo looks up in complete shock, unable to process who could be the owner of that massive weapon. The giant blade decorated with a skull glows brightly on the ground, releasing a massive shockwave across the entire basement. A familiar voice praises the boy for holding out well, leaving the young hunter immensely relieved to recognize his master's presence. Wolfgang appears looking imposing, and lets it be known that Jin-woo proved himself to be a worthy man capable of protecting his comrades with a shield in hand. Jin-woo sighs in relief and calls out his master's name as he sees the imposing warrior standing before him with his colossal sword. Wolfgang glares at the approaching horde of freaky monsters, raising his giant weapon with unshakable resolve. The barbarian hero grits his teeth furiously, eyes glowing with blue energy, focused on wiping out the enemy army. The warrior roars and swings a devastating sword strike through the air, releasing a massive wave of slashing energy. Wolfgang's magical attack rips through the battlefield from end to end, vaporizing dozens of beasts in a blue blast. The horde's creatures roar and disintegrate completely as they get struck by the crushing force of the barbarian's hit. Wolfgang tells the boy to rest up right now, leaving the young man surprised by his master's protective yet commanding tone. The demon lord attacks, launching high-speed red chains set on binding the hero once and for all. The impact of the chains destroys the basement's stone floor. Kicking up debris with the creature's brutal strike, Wolfgang blocks the attack and gets wrapped up in the chains, confidently declaring he'll handle the rest of the enemies himself. The evil entity keeps firing more metal restraints, attempting to immobilize the barbarian with its dark energy. Another hard crash against the basement floor creates a cloud of smoke, leaving the area completely wrecked. Trapped in the middle of the iron chains, the master flexes his massive muscles, announcing he'll take over the fight from here. Wolfgang demands that the demon lord spill everything he knows about the demons, promising a quick end if he cooperates. The demon laughs mockingly at the offer and angrily asks how a mere human insect dares talk to him like that. Wolfgang answers that he gave him a chance to go in peace, warning that he'll erase him from existence if he refuses to talk. The monster grows deeply enraged, calling the warrior a miserable worm and daring the barbarian to try and finish him if he can. The entity casts the shadow binding technique, wrapping the hero in strands of pure, deep red shadow energy. Wolfgang struggles to move under the shadow restraints and mocks the enemy, calling his spell a cheap trick. The demon raises his chain-wrapped fist and hatefully orders the clueless human to be completely crushed. By the technique, Wolfgang lets out a deafening roar of fury as the red energy squeezes his body in mid-air with full force. The terrifying Lord of Darkness watches the trapped hero, but suddenly notices something wrong with the shadow restraints. The strands of crimson energy start cracking and snapping under the absurd physical strength output by the muscular warrior. The shadow-binding bonds burst all at once, unable to contain the barbarian's insane power. Wolfgang breaks free with a blast of blue aura and leaps toward the enemy to land a heavy blow. The demon floats back in surprise, seeing that the hero broke through the shadows, realizing he isn't some ordinary human to mess with. A massive wave of blue shock devastation wrecks the cracked ground, throwing up a curtain of dark smoke across the whole battlefield. Wolfgang emerges from the smoke, swinging a two-handed aerial strike aimed at breaking the creature's armor. The hero's sword hits the demon's chest with massive force, splitting open a glowing crack across its dark shell. The demon lord stumbles back off balance, letting out a groan of pure pain as he feels the crushing force of the barbarian's hit. The monster slams hard onto the floor with a crash, shattering the stone ground from the sheer power of the blow it took. Wolfgang looks down at him and sneers with contempt, saying he's way too weak and not even worth remembering by name. The creature flies into a rage at being made fun of and commands his minions to take him down, screaming that he is the dread demon Ombrax. The massive stone golem rises back up from the shadows, positioning itself right behind Wolfgang to crush him with its rocky fist. Jinwoo shows up carrying his wounded brother on his back, screaming in desperation to warn Wolfgang about the danger coming from behind. The rocky giant brings its fist down toward the barbarian's back, set on snapping every bone in the warrior's body with one punch. Wolfgang glances out of the corner of his eye with coldness and rage, showing not an ounce of concern over the golem's swing. With a single fluid motion, the barbarian throws a reverse strike that shatters the stone golem into thousands of pieces. Jinwoo stares at the scene in total shock, his jaw dropping in disbelief at the absurd feat he just witnessed. The boy screams, his mind blown, and right at that exact instant, he realizes one single major truth about his life. The kid mentally concludes that no matter what, he needed to stay on Wolfgang's good side if he wanted to survive. The chunks of the defeated golem crash to the ground with a loud thud, startling the boy who is still carrying his injured brother. Wolfgang calls him Minion Number 1 and orders him to move it and get his older brother out of there to safety. Jinwoo happily accepts the order, silently giving thanks for having such a powerful warrior fighting by his side. Ombrax curses in shock at where this human monster came from, regretting having to pull out his real trump card ahead of time. A crimson mist spreads across the area while the demon lord gathers all his hidden dark power for the fight. The creature uses the shadow evolution technique, taking on a new, extremely menacing red armor form. Wolfgang watches him without showing any fear, sarcastically commenting that the demon really has plenty of tricks up his sleeve. The transformed demon strikes up close, screaming in a rage that he wants to see how long the human can keep mocking him. Wolfgang grips his colossal sword tight, bracing himself to take the impact of the opponent's strike head-on. The transformed demon starts a violent sequence of slashing attacks, sending red beams of energy cutting through the air. Jinwoo screams out in frustration as he sees the monster's body turn into smoke to dodge, calling the demon out for cheating. The opponent slickly avoids Wolfgang's strike by shifting into red smoke. Hovering right above the hero, Ombrax appears laughing right behind the barbarian, asking if he really thought that simple attack would be enough to take him out. Wolfgang stays completely silent, thinking to himself that at the current pace of battle, he'll be able to wipe out the creature easily. The demon lord goes completely ballistic over the hero's calm demeanor, starting to yell wild insults while gritting his teeth. The creature charges furiously at Wolfgang, screaming in irritation as he realizes the warrior keeps acting completely superior. The monster throws a heavy slash aimed straight at the hero's face, demanding that human worm die already. In a flashback, Wolfgang remembers his friend Jonas explaining that certain demons turn to mist to mess with their opponents. Jonas assured him those monsters were helpless against his angel-blessed hammer, packing the incredible power of lightning. In the memory, Jonas crushes an enemy with a devastating strike from his electric hammer, causing a massive explosion of golden light. The demon from the past was left completely shocked upon seeing its attack blocked by a human. Unable to believe what was happening, the monster realized in terror that it was facing a warrior wielding a holy weapon blessed directly by angels. Wolfgang holds the handle of the powerful electric hammer, silently thanking his late friend Jonas for that holy legacy. Back in the present, the demon lord roars furiously as he notices the barbarian wielding a glowing, electricity-charged weapon. Wolfgang delivers a crushing blow with Jonas's hammer, setting off a massive burst of golden lightning that hits Ombrax head-on. The electrical force destroys the enemy's shadow armor, which begins cracking and blasting bright beams of light from the impact. Wrapped up in the storm of golden lightning, the demon lord screams in sheer agony while his body gets scorched by the holy energy. The monster realizes he won't be able to stand up to that devastating power. Frantically lamenting that things have gotten completely out of hand, Wolfgang raises his electric hammer and demands one last time for the creature to spill the exact location of Lord Devilhouse. The demon tries to escape by turning into a small puff of black smoke, darting off quickly toward the sky while cursing in rage. The little puff of smoke complains bitterly about losing to a pathetic human. While the barbarian stares up from below with cold eyes, Wolfgang throws one final strike with the electric hammer toward the sky, commanding the creature to answer his question. A golden lightning bolt strikes the demon full force in midair, making it let out a desperate scream before getting completely vaporized. The residual energy drops into the lava rift while Wolfgang puts away his holy weapon. Taking in the surrounding wreckage, Jinwoo runs over to his father's body, which has returned to human form, frantically asking if he's still alive and okay. Wolfgang silently regrets that his only lead on Lord Devilhouse's whereabouts got completely wiped out right there. The warrior glances off to the side as he hears the sound of multiple cars speeding toward the site of the grim battle. Several black vehicles from the Hunter Association pull up to the destroyed location to contain the chaos caused by the ritual. An elegant woman in a suit and high heels steps out of one of the main cars. Stepping firmly onto the cracked street, Choi Eun-ha points upward and sternly orders her squad to quickly clear out all the remaining monsters from the horde. Multiple association agents move in with their weapons against the surviving creatures, starting a full cleanup of the area. The vice president walks up looking powerful toward Wolfgang, who silently watches her with his huge wolf pelt cape draped over his shoulders. The barbarian warrior glares at her coldly and asks directly who she is and what she wants by suddenly approaching him. She introduces herself as Choi Eun-ha and assures him that her hunter squad will handle the rest of the creatures that came out of there. Eun-ha extends her hand to the hero and invites him to headquarters, revealing she has leads on Lord Devilhouse. The scene cuts to the massive Hunter Association building, shining under the late afternoon sun in the big city. Wolfgang walks into the fancy president's office and gets a warm welcome from an elegant man who was waiting for him there. The man offers a handshake with a friendly smile, introducing himself officially as Lee Jung-hwan, president of the Hunter Association. Wolfgang shakes the president's hand firmly. Introducing himself back as Wolfgang the Crepe Lee Jung-hwan, notices the warrior's incredible build and is blown away by the overwhelming power he gives off. The hero cuts straight to the point and asks why he was called in, making the president smile at his directness. Jung-hwan reveals flat out that the demon lord Lord Devilhouse the Barbarian is looking for is located in the underhell. Wolfgang acts surprised and repeats the name of that dread underground realm, trying to wrap his head around what that info means. The president explains that monsters hate sunlight, which is why they built that subterranean hideout packed with freaky creatures. The hero puts his hand up and cuts the speech short, demanding to know only the location of the entrance. But the president asks for patience. Jung-hwan reminds him that Wolfgang broke a holy relic during his promotion test and wants to go over the consequences of that. The president keeps listing off incidents, bringing up how the hero set the Slime King free by shattering the guild barrier. He recalls that a terrifying three-headed demon dog was summoned right in front of the barbarian in the Seoul Academy courtyard. Jung-hwan wraps up by mentioning that the hero easily took down the dreaded Cleaner, one of the most dangerous assassins in the hunter world. Lee Jung-hwan remarks that the barbarian faced Ombrax and walked away completely scratch-free, prompting Wolfgang to ask what he's really driving at. The president suspects that the sudden appearance of someone so insanely strong who keeps bumping into demons isn't just a coincidence. The man opens his decorated fan and warns that he'll need to test Wolfgang's real skills and intentions to guarantee safety. The sun of Hwanung constellation summons a large spiritual altar beneath the starry sky to kick off the mental duel between the two. The mighty constellation Danganwangam manifests, looking massive right behind the president who holds his fan in position. Wolfgang looks at the deity with disdain and asks if Lee Jung-wan is implying he's working with the demons. The president moves his fan, generating a gust of green wind, and answers that it isn't exactly a direct accusation Jung-hwan forms leaf tornadoes on the spiritual altar, and gives fair warning that he's just going to test the barbarian's strength on a surface level. Back in the real office, Choi Yoon-ha adjusts her gloves and impatiently mentions it's about time for those two to come out of that realm. The vice president thinks her boss's strict background check is impressive, silently fangirling and finding his demeanor super charming. The green wind portal fades, scattering leaves around the room, and Yoon-ha excitedly asks if they finally finished the test. A huge blast of green energy hits the secret altar chamber, bringing their intense spiritual clash to an end. Lee Jung-wan drops to his knees on the room floor, completely drained and groaning in pain, sending his vice president into a panic. Wolfgang walks out, looking imposing under a greenish aura, and laughs it off, saying the association president is pathetic and weak. Yoon-ha gets furious at the barbarian's nerve and demands he show respect to the hunter regarded as the absolute top in South Korea. Wolfgang calmly points out that he's just pointing out the weakness of someone who really can't beat him in a fight. The vice president grits her teeth in pure rage and starts calling the warrior names, seeing that he shows zero fear. The imperial concubine of Emperor Xuanzong of Tang constellation appears glowing in the president's office to answer Yoon-ha's wish. The president screams out in panic for his vice president to cancel the attack right now, aware of the extreme danger of provoking the barbarian. The gorgeous Chinese deity floats gracefully, using the domination seduction skill directly on the colossal warrior. The female spirit tries to kiss and charm Wolfgang's mind with rose petals, attempting to make him surrender to her charm. Yoon-ha mocks the barbarian, calling him an insignificant, arrogant human for looking down on the association leader. The vice president boastfully claims she's already taken care of the enemy, completely unaware that Wolfgang is still standing. Totally immune to the magic, Jung-wan yells out in total panic, warning his partner about the terrifying danger standing right behind her back. The woman turns around confused, her eyes popping wide as she sees Wolfgang's giant hand coming at her face at high speed. Lee Jung-hwan swallows hard in fear, recalling Wolfgang's crushing strength, fully aware they don't stand a chance of winning. Yoon-ha collapses defeated, groaning in pain on the broken floor, while the colossal barbarian casually walks toward the president. Wolfgang looks at the injured leader dead seriously and demands he hand over all the info on the Underhell entrance once and for all. The scene moves to the Underhell, revealing a massive dark stone castle surrounded by rushing falls of hot lava. In the gloomy sector of the Subhell's third floor, the castle stands in dead silence under an aura of pure evil. The tiny surviving puff of Ombrax's smoke crawls to the spot, calling out to his old pal to ask for a favor with his recovery. The demon lord Devilhouse sits tall on his throne and coldly asks, since when the two of them became pals. Ombrax breaks out in a sweat at the harsh response and asks if the ruler is still holding on to old grudges from the past. Devilhouse hatefully recalls losing his entire army and domain 1,000 years ago to his rival, shooting down his words. The small monster tries to strike a deal, revealing that a powerful barbarian went up to the surface and is actively hunting the Hell Lord. The ruler of darkness rests his dark claw on his knee, thinking deeply about the piece of info he just received. Devilhouse agrees to help his fallen ally, figuring he wants safe passage back to his old turf. The lord tells the small monster to step closer, and the rival thanks him excitedly, promising to help him drop down to even deeper floors. The ruler holds the small red smoke puff in his massive iron claw, thoughtfully repeating the proposal of dropping to lower floors. Devilhouse says the deal sounds tempting, but lets out a magic aura that terrifies Ombrax as he realizes he's been played. The ruler uses the absolute petrification technique on the tiny creature, who screams insults at the lord while turning to solid stone. A cruel, sinister smile forms under Devilhouse's dark hood as he enjoys his quick, brutal betrayal of his rival. The dread demon lord laughs out loud mockingly, commenting that Ombrax was a total fool for trusting a demon's word. Devilhouse tosses the petrified little monster away with total disgust, calling his old rival a truly pathetic creature. The rock trapping his rival lands right on top of a giant mountain of monster bones and skulls piled up in the castle basement. The small, petrified body rolls down, stopping right among the remains of hundreds of enemies previously wiped out by the Lord. A massive, dark silhouette throws its arm up in rage, spreading a crimson aura of hatred through the depths of the lava dungeon. A metal sword sits driven into the top of the bone pile, surrounded by mystery shadows in the hell beast's lair. Devil House touches the bones in anger, reflecting on how his arch nemesis from the past is still alive up on the surface. The demon lord grits his teeth, eyes glowing with pure hatred. Furiously cursing that damned barbarian warrior, Wolfgang warns that the two of them aren't strong enough to take on demons and asks if there's anyone stronger nearby to lend a hand. Younghwan explains there are stronger hunters in other countries, but in South Korea he's top tier, leading the barbarian to decide to hit the underhell solo. Younghwan asks Wolfgang not to rush and tries to settle him down, saying that Demon's appearance was just a rare fluke unlikely to happen again. Wolfgang looks out the building window and feels something is way off, while Younghwan asks confused if there's really an issue going on. The warrior stays deep in thought because it's been a good while since the demon was taken out, yet that terrible sky darkness still hasn't cleared up. Suddenly, a massive quake shakes the building's whole frame, leaving the association president utterly terrified, having no clue what just happened. Wolfgang immediately picks up on a heavy surge of dark energy, recognizing the danger heading their way. A colossal blast of fire and light cuts through the city sky, tearing up everything around and painting the horizon red. Right in the middle of the flames in Seoul, the dread, giant demon Bulkalus emerges, spreading panic and wreckage everywhere he steps. Meanwhile, over in the Daejeon area, a terrifying bat demon named Batwing pops up in the skies to unleash chaos. Over in the city of Paju, the terrifying winged demoness, Astaroth shows up wrapped in heavy flames. The monster Bulkalus keeps up his ghastly appearance right in central Seoul, setting multiple buildings ablaze with his lava body. The monster Batwing roars fiercely as he flies high, tearing apart structures across the city of Daejeon. The powerful, terrifying Astaroth takes her stance in Paju, ready to kick off her brutal attack on the humans. Jung-hwan panics upon noticing the arrival of another scary creature, but the barbarian seriously confirms it really is a demon. Without missing a beat, Wolfgang leaps at high speed, shattering the skyscraper's giant glass window to dive straight into battle midair. The colossal warrior gets a tight grip on Jonas's hammer handle. Pooling his energy for the clash, Wolfgang plummets from the top of the building amidst glass shards, starting his descent down to the street. The barbarian leaps across city structures, finding it super weird that so many demons are showing up in such fast sequence. Wolfgang lands with full force on top of a building, wondering if that terrible demon invasion has kicked off all over again. He keeps sprinting and leaping frantically across rooftops, fully aware the current situation is crazy dangerous. Back in the wrecked office, Younghwan is left frozen, and Yoon-ha fearfully reminds him they're on the 75th floor. The vice president wonders what to do after seeing that madness, and Younghwan suggests they quickly follow him somehow. 10 minutes prior, over at the famous Blue Dragon family estate in Paju, the place was dead quiet while someone was putting in work. Go Yuna, the young heiress to the Blue Dragon family, catches her breath after pulling off an intense string of spear drills. She trains with quick leaps, throwing precise strikes through the air, showing off great agility and focus with her spear movements. With a powerful thrust, Yuna pierces right through a wooden training dummy, leaving a clean hole in the target. The young woman pauses her training but stays unsatisfied, thinking to herself that this still isn't enough and that she needs to get way stronger. She remembers how people hyped her up for coming from the famous S-rank hunter Go Songyong's family, but feels she got way too comfortable with it. Yuna remembers the day she tried to get a deity's backing, and how everyone around was dropping comments full of expectations over her choice. But the Blue Rose Lancer constellation ended the temporary pact because it found her skills weak, firing up the young woman to prove her worth. Determined, she grips the spear handle tight, swearing to grind even harder so she doesn't let the next chance slip away. The young woman lets out a tired sigh as she notices her palm is bruised and bleeding from overdoing the effort. Her father shows up clapping, praising her great combat stance, saying he'll soon be able to hand the family leadership over to her S-rank hunter. Go Seongyong starts tearing up with pride seeing his daughter's drive, but Yuna, annoyed, tells him to drop the dramatic act. Yuna lets him know she still has a long way to go, and that her big goal right now is getting back the constellation's respect and contract. Seongyong cries even harder seeing how mature his daughter has become, leaving the young woman pretty embarrassed by that cringy scene. Her father shifts topics as he hears weird noises coming from outside, but tells her not to stress over the trouble going down in Seoul. Suddenly, a deafening noise blasts through the estate, sending father and daughter into complete shock. The violent impact blows both of them back while a shockwave snaps roof tiles and destroys the main courtyard floor. Yuna's eyes widen in fear, unable to grasp what's taking place right inside her own home high above the estate. The terrifying demoness, Astaroth, hovers in the middle of a massive column of destructive fire. Seongyong looks up horrified as he recognizes the overwhelming presence of that evil creature. Yuna gets into a guard stance with her spear, but her father steps in front, commanding her to get inside the house right now and call the association. The demoness looks down coldly at the humans below and warns she'll only ask one question, demanding to know where that barbarian guy is in the underhell. Ruler Devil House commands his 3 dispatched demons to go up to Earth's surface to hunt down and bag the barbarian. The giant demon. Bulkalis asks confused how they're supposed to find the target if the king just refers to him as some simple barbarian. The ruler explains with contempt that he's a brainless fool who always charges in swinging a giant weapon, promising a huge reward for his capture. Bulkalis walks around wrecking soul, thinking it's impossible to find someone like that, doubting a human could be dumb enough to attack him head-on. Right at that exact second, a wild battle cry echoes through the city sky, cutting off the giant fire creature's thoughts. Wolfgang comes leaping in hot toward his target, letting out a wild battle cry that echoes across the whole region. Bulkalis spots the charge and thinks Devil House's description of the barbarian's behavior was spot on. Wolfgang attacks the giant monster from above, yelling out furiously, asking how that creature dares step up to where humans live. The demon Batwing suddenly swoops in laughing loud, warning that the reward for taking down the barbarian will be his, not Bulkalis's. The flying creature dives fast, trying to hit the warrior from behind to secure the prize first. Meanwhile, over at the estate in Paju, Hunter Go Seongyang is taken down, his spear left driven into the destroyed ground. The S-rank man lies helpless on the floor, completely shocked at being beaten so fast and easily. Astaroth holds the hunter by the neck, praising his strength for a human. Demanding he spill what he knows about the barbarian, Seongyang tells her not to make him laugh, and the demoness decides to lift the hunter up in the air to see how long he can take the torture. Right then, Yuna comes running back to the courtyard frantically, letting her father know she managed to get through to the association. The young woman freezes in panic upon seeing her father being choked by the evil creature's sharp claws. She tries to yell out for her father, but her voice gives out as she realizes the extreme gravity of his situation. Astaroth shows off a scary, sadistic grin with her sharp teeth, getting a thrill out of her victim's panic. Yuna hesitates, scared to take another step, feeling her current strength isn't enough to rescue her father from that spot. She asks herself if it's even worth trying to fight now that she lacks a constellation contract, fearing it will just lead to her death. The young woman shakes with fear, thinking the monster beat her own father and that she's totally drained from her heavy training. Yuna wonders if the smartest play right now isn't just to wait for the association hunters to show up, even beaten up and choking. Seongyang looks warmly at his daughter with the very last bit of strength he has left. The girl watches that terrible scene wide-eyed, feeling a massive wave of agony build up inside her chest. The hunter cracks a gentle smile through all that pain, whispering that it's okay to calm his daughter down. He asks her to stay safe and run away, leaving the young woman even more panicked over those parting words. Astaroth loses her patience with the silence, warning that if he won't talk, it's time to die, making the hunter spit blood. Out of nowhere, Yuna bursts out at crazy speed, her spear glowing with intense blue energy. The demoness gets caught totally off guard by the sudden attack, having no idea how the girl managed to close the distance so fast. Letting out a cry of sheer drive, the young woman charges in full force to protect her father's life no matter what. She delivers a devastating spear strike loaded with blue energy, hitting the villain with all the strength left in her body. Astaroth is forced to back off and defend against that sudden hit, letting out a groan of pure surprise and annoyance. Yuna lands nimbly on the ruined floor, quickly setting her stance to keep up the fight on solid ground. She holds her hurt father with one arm while pointing her spear heroically toward the terrifying enemy. Seongyang coughs heavily, apologizing for letting his daughter get dragged in, begging her to fall back since the monster is too strong. Yuna firmly replies that she's going to stand up to the demoness, saying she's the one who should apologize for freezing up earlier. The young woman remembers her promise never again to freeze in fear during a crazy, dangerous moment like this one. She swears to herself that if she got another shot, she'd grab it tight, and that she can't just run off just because she's scared. Yuna decides she has to stop coming up with excuses to quit, focusing all her drive on keeping her father safe. Her hand stops shaking from tiredness, and she grips the weapon's handle with insane force that surprises even herself. The young woman mentally swears never to play the coward again, unlocking an amazing power around her body. A super powerful blue glow bursts from the floor, lighting up the whole estate with intense spiritual light. The Blue Rose Lancer constellation is blown away by the girl's drive, showing respect for her unbreakable heart. Seeing such bravery, the powerful constellation decides to offer an official contract to Yuna, leaving her shocked and fulfilled. A blue-tinted magic energy completely wraps around the Blue Dragon family's young heiress Yuna, swears she will never hesitate again, officially becoming the contractor of the constellation under the power of the heroine. Joan of Arc Astaroth gets furious, seeing her pull off the contract right now, warning she'll take her life for ruining her fun. With her new divine powers active, the young woman takes an imposing stance, ready to throw down against the terrifying demoness. Yuna activates the water walking skill, making clones and magic circles under her feet to throw off her opponent. The ghastly Astaroth looks around, panicked, unable to grasp how this human girl got so insanely fast and strong. Using her ultimate piercing spear technique, the warrior surges forward in a lethal strike against the enemy. The blue energy hit connects full force on the demoness, making her scream in pain from the crushing force of the spiritual impact. Meanwhile in Seoul, Wolfgang keeps up his mid-air assault, screaming at Bolkalis, asking how he dares invade the human realm. Batwing laughs mockingly, trying to mess up the clash, yelling that he'll be taking the big hunt reward for himself. The flying demon dives fast toward the Barbarian, trying to catch him off guard in the middle of that intense clash. Wolfgang connects a heavy blow on the giant Bolkalas, starting a super loud direct clash right in the middle of the street. The impact sets off a massive fire blast that lights up the whole avenue, scaring people in the cars parked nearby. A car slams its brakes hard, smoke rolling off the tires as it stops right in front of where the violent fight is going down. Yunha gets out of the car totally shocked and in disbelief, commenting that there was no sign a demon was going to pop up there. The monster roars furiously with his flaming head, while the vice president fearfully watches that ghastly descent. She sees Wolfgang leap fearlessly toward the giant creature's chest to land another strike with his weapon. The Barbarian lets out a furious yell as an energy mark glows bright on his head, focusing all his strength into the hit. He throws a heavy slash that rips through the demon's flames, setting off another huge shockwave across the city street. Yunha panics hard in the middle of all that destruction, frantically asking herself what she has to do to survive. The massive blast tears up the asphalt, throwing concrete chunks everywhere, destroying Seoul's main avenue. The giant Bolkalas hits the surrounding structures hard, making tons of building debris start crashing down. The wreckage falls right onto Yunha's car, leaving the vice president panicked as she sees her ride get completely flattened. Wolfgang suddenly lands right in front of her, and intimidated by the warrior's terrifying presence, she immediately apologizes. The Barbarian asks what she's apologizing for and questions why she followed him being so weak, prompting her to explain that 3 demons showed up at the same time. Yunha gets ready to lay out the details of the critical situation in the other cities while the giant warrior listens closely. She pulls out a map showing that the monsters popped up at the same time in Seoul, nearby Paju, and further away in Daejeon. Wolfgang thinks that, just like Yeren said before, her intel gathering and scouting skills are super useful. He asks the vice president to point out the best destination pick based on that data, leaving the woman totally confused and stammering. In the Underhell, Ruler Devil House wonders if Bolkalis was taken out. Annoyed he couldn't lure the Barbarian down into the sub-hell, the Lord smiles sadistically, thinking there are still 2 demons left. Aware the rival won't be able to recover his strength without sunlight if he drops down there. Back in Paju, Yuna lands her piercing spear strike straight on Astaroth, slicing the air with a bright burst of blue energy. The demoness bleeds from her face, furious to realize she was hurt and that a mere human holds such crazy spiritual power. Yuna notices she dealt real damage to the enemy and gets ready to drop another heavy strike while she's got the opening. She attacks again with her spear, setting off a massive explosion of blue light that wrecks the floor all around the training field. A massive screen of dust and smoke covers the whole spot following the devastating impact of the young heiress's spiritual strike. When the dust clears a bit, the 2 fighters show up standing in the middle of the completely broken, cracked ground. Yuna breathes heavily from using the constellation's full power, but stays confident knowing the demoness took serious damage from the hit. Astaroth goes completely insane over the wounds on her face, screaming insults at the girl, calling her a worm with pure hatred. The evil creature's body starts undergoing a freaky, violent mutation, ripping its skin and fanning out its massive, dark wings. The young heiress backs off terrified, unable to wrap her head around what's going on as she sees that monstrous transformation right before her eyes. showing off a massive maw full of sharp teeth. The villain sarcastically says she'll compliment the human strength for making her reveal her true form. Astaroth takes the form of a giant demon dragon and roars loud, leaving Yuna completely frozen in panic at the size of the danger. The girl shakes in panic looking at that giant nightmare, wondering how it would even be possible to beat a demon at that power level. The dragon lunges forward, attacking wildly with its giant claws, screaming for the human to just die. Yuna uses her spear to block the giant claw's push, generating bright sparks and heavy pressure at the point of impact. The young woman grits her teeth and groans in pain, trying to stand up to the crushing force of the winged beast's attack. She gets hit and thrown back violently while the monster roars loud, breaking the ground around them even more. Yuna desperately realizes her opponent's speed and strength skyrocketed, fearing it might be too late to try another defense. Out of nowhere, multiple glowing energy ropes pop up and bind tightly around the giant dragon's body and wings. A group of warriors rocking traditional gear appears, holding onto the spiritual ropes with full force to pin down the ghastly creature. Astaroth roars, confused and annoyed, finding herself completely pinned, trying to break free from those weird spiritual ropes. A guy in traditional noble clothes walks up smiling, introducing himself as the Royal Secret Inspector, saying he came to bag the wicked C-rank hunter. Kim Junhan explains he came to sign a contract in the area, but ran over to help as soon as he spotted the demon. Yuna warns that it's way too dangerous for a regular hunter, but he explains his constellation gets way stronger based on how evil the enemy is. The royal seal glows, and the demoness feels massive crushing pressure on her body, realizing the harder she pulls to break free, the harder she gets crushed. Kim Junhan yells for Yuna to strike now, and the young woman takes the perfect opening to leap in fast with her spear ready. Using the final knot technique, the warrior throws a devastating piercing strike wrapped in a strong spiral of bright blue energy. The heiress surges forward, eyes glowing with pure drive, screaming that this is the absolute end for the evil creature. The huge dragon watches the attack come in relentlessly, unable to move due to the inspector's spiritual ropes. Astaroth panics seeing the spear tip right up at her chest. In disbelief at being cornered in such an embarrassing way, Astaroth roars with hatred in her giant dragon form, attacking in a blind rage while ordering the human to die once and for all. Junhan panics, seeing the lethal hit come in fast, lamenting he won't have enough time to cast his defenses. Yuna watches frozen as the terrible attack comes, while a violent gust of wind slices through the air around her. At crazy speed, Seongyong steps in front of his daughter to take the fatal hit, silently praying for his constellation to give him the power to protect her, even if it costs him his life. The Blue Rose Lancer constellation accepts Seongyong's brave resolve, deciding to answer its contractor's desperate call. The deity senses the warrior's death is super close, deeply lamenting as he picks his spear up off the broken floor. A massive pile of blue energy completely wraps around the hunter's body, waking up his final reserve of spiritual power. The last ember of the Blue Rose technique grants him power that breaks past all normal limits until his life energy gets totally drained. Seongyong drops a massive attack that hits Astaroth square in the chest, setting off a devastating blast in the courtyard to save Yuna's life. The young woman watches that terrible scene wide-eyed while her father's blood sprays violently right in front of her. Even critically hurt and on the verge of death, Seongyong smiles gently at her, whispering for his daughter to stay safe. He takes one last step forward while the powerful blue energy blasts one final time super bright all around him. A massive flash clears out the spot, burning up the rest of the warrior's life force in a devastating show of light and power. Inside the dense smoke left over in the courtyard, Junhan runs over worried toward Yuna, frantically asking if she's all right. The young heiress stays in absolute shock, breaking into a cold sweat while calling out for her father with a shaky voice. Showing zero reaction, Junin tries to pull her back, warning the spot is still dangerous and that they should wait for the dust to settle before acting. Yuna turns around with a dark, lifeless look that scares the inspector, who freezes realizing Seongyong's terrible sacrifice. Suddenly, Astaroth's giant silhouette rises out of the smoke, and the villain mocks, saying a single human's life isn't enough to kill her. The monster surges forward wildly, screaming that she'll wipe out everyone there, not caring if they're barbarians or not. The evil creature opens her giant maw, ready to drop a lethal attack on the two helpless hunters, but Astaroth stops out of nowhere, sensing a crushing presence coming from above, muttering, terrified, to wait a second. She looks up at the sky completely horrified as she sees a glowing streak dropping fast right toward her. Wolfgang crashes down, crushing the monster, and the villain recognizes the warrior. Deciding she shouldn't fight head-on against someone packing so much power, Astaroth plans to lure him into the Underhell to Lord Devil House, trying to start a conversation by calling him a barbarian to play him. But before she can even finish speaking, the barbarian lands a brutal, crushing blow straight to the giant dragon's head. Wolfgang slams her violently onto the broken ground, introducing himself, looking imposing as the legendary barbarian hero of the wolf tribe. He seriously warns he isn't some savage and makes it clear he has zero interest in hearing out offers from demon creatures. The scene shifts over to the Daejeon area, showing a picture of pure destruction with multiple hunter bodies scattered across the floor. The dread demon Batwing lies defeated on the ground, completely run through by dozens of glowing golden arrows. A super hurt, drained figure stays on her knees on the wrecked road. After that terrible clash, wrapped-up S-rank hunter Kim Hee-yeon drops exhausted onto the rain-slicked floor, struggling to ask herself if they finally pulled off the win. Daejeon's dark sky starts clearing up little by little, revealing sun rays after the removal of that terrible demon threat. Days later, Daejeon shows up under rebuild with multiple crews working to clear out the massive mountain of wreckage. Multiple workers help collect gear and medical supplies amidst the destruction left by the city fight. Hee-yeon coordinates the efforts, calling for more people to clean up Sector 3, ordering doctors to prioritize the badly wounded Sun Guild leader Kim Hee-yeon, asks everyone to hang in a bit longer. Even though they're completely wiped out from the fight, survivors talk in awe about how she led the fight against the demon and is now managing the recovery, calling her insanely strong. Hee-yeon lets out a long, tired sigh looking at the horizon, feeling the heavy weight of exhaustion after saving her city from danger. A little later, the scene moves over to South Korea's Hunter Association building on a sunny day inside an official conference room. The country's top guild leaders meet up to talk over the current emergency. President Lee Jung-won thanks everyone for showing up and gets ready to recap the events and line up the next steps they need to take. Jung-won seriously reveals that 3 super powerful demons dropped simultaneously onto South Korean territory. Moonlight Guild leader Ha Young-eun is shocked, asking if the rumors were real. Wondering if there wasn't a single warning sign, Taebek Guild leader Jung Yuja finds it hard to believe, commenting that demon appearances have always been super rare in the country. The president turns on the image projector, displaying a photo taken in Daejeon, asking to zoom in on the screen so everyone can see better. On the zoomed-in shot, you can clearly see the outline of a winged fire creature captured by cameras before they got destroyed. Jung-won explains there are no more clips due to the destruction, but reveals the hunter who fought and beat the monster is sitting right here. Hee-yeon seriously confirms the president's words, admitting to everyone that her guild really had to throw down with that terrible demon. She reveals that fighting just one of those creatures destroyed a huge chunk of central Daejeon, leaving dozens dead and badly hurt. The leaders panic upon hearing that one of the strongest hunters got pushed to the edge, wondering why monsters are popping up with zero warning. Xiangshan Guildmaster, A-rank hunter Kang Mi-yeon, stays quiet, watching that whole tense argument in the office. President Lee Jung-won slaps the meeting table hard, explaining that exact danger risk was why he decided to invite a few specific people. He starts bringing up the heroes who managed to beat the terrible demons that hit the Seoul and Paju areas. Just as the door opens, Wolfgang walks in looking imposing into the conference room, backed by manager Kim Jin-won and young archaeologist Kang Yerin. The manager introduces the group, but Hunter Ma-yeon gets super thoughtful, asking herself what an archaeologist would be doing in the middle of this crisis. The guild leaders start whispering to each other, asking who those unknown people are, noting that one of them doesn't even look like he's from the country. The cocky gold agency representative, Hunter Jong Gapsu, checks the info on his phone and complains, saying this has to be a total scam. Gapsu mocks the Mu agency's reputation, accusing them of staging the whole invasion just to fix the problem later and get famous, only aiming for cash. The manager tries to back them up, saying those heavy claims are lies, while Yerin next to him gets super annoyed by the disrespect. President Jung-won steps in fast, ordering Hunter Gapsu to stop throwing around such trash talk against the association's guests. Gapsu slaps the table furious, asking if the president is kidding with him, questioning if he gathered all those key people just to play them. The man points to their profile on his phone and yells that the manager is a useless ex-C-rank hunter, and Wolfgang is just a regular F-rank hunter. Gapsu complains that the city is in ruins and thousands are hurt, thinking it's ridiculous that random nobodies beat what an S-rank couldn't touch. He questions the president mockingly on how he really expects guild leaders to buy a story that makes zero sense. Like that one, Wolfgang raises his arm ready to react, but the manager panics, begging the barbarian to hold back because of the crazy costs if they wreck the room. Yirin hears a noise at the door, and Hunter Go Seong-yang suddenly pops up, letting them know in a serious tone that he'll personally answer that question. Seong-yang walks into the room covered in bandages alongside his daughter Yuna, firmly assuring them that he personally vouches for Wolfgang's credibility and truth. Miyeon remembers rushing frantically to the Blue Dragon family estate in Paju right after the terrible hit they took. That day, she pulled up and saw Seong-yang down on the ruined floor being held by his daughter, while the giant barbarian was crouched next to them. The veteran hunter's body was completely drained and motionless, showing barely any signs of life after burning through all his spiritual energy. The Seongshin guild master panicked seeing her friend's terrible state, asking herself if he was really on the verge of dying right there. The manager asked her to step back for a second, leaving the woman super confused, not getting what the employee was planning to do. Right then, Wolfgang activated High Angel Air's healing skill, channeling a powerful, glowing golden energy straight into the hurt man. Miyeon watched that scene totally blown away and breathless, feeling the overwhelming strength of the healing magic used by the F-rank warrior. Seong-yang's chest started moving again, and his heavy wounds closed up fast, thanks to the divine miracle worked by the barbarian. The warrior sat up recovered to his daughter's happy screams. While Wolfgang explained it was an angel's blessing and that he needed to rest back in the present, Miyeon remembers that miracle and asks herself who Wolfgang really is, suspecting there's way more behind his F-rank status. Seong-yang reports that the barbarian took down the monster that hit his guild and saved his life on the edge of death, swearing he puts his name on the line for him. Miyeon decides to back the group, confirming she saw the rescue with her own eyes. Thinking she needs to help them out to figure out his identity, the other hunters whisper, amazed seeing two big-deal guild leaders vouching for the barbarian's strength, wondering if he's actually powerful. The president reveals the hero came from 1,000 years ago, having been petrified by demons and recently woken up by the archaeology hunters. Jung-hwan explains the records are old, but the power shown makes the story legit, which is why he asked for the warrior's backing. Gapsu fakes, accepting that the barbarian has some skill, but asks mockingly how an F-rank on paper could help them out in this crisis. Wolfgang looks around the room and says with disdain that everyone there is weak and totally pathetic compared to the past warriors of his time. Gapsu gets furious at the jab and yells at the barbarian to shut his mouth, reminding him he's just an F-rank hunter and needs to show more respect. Wolfgang points at Kim Hyeon, letting them know the only person in that conference room capable of surviving a real fight against a demon is her. The Sun Guild master stays dead silent at the warrior's claim, keeping her serious gaze locked on the barbarian. Annoyed, Gapsu walks up to Wolfgang and threatens him with a finger to his chest, telling him to watch his mouth if he doesn't want to walk out hurt. The Mu agency manager panics, grabbing his head with both hands as he predicts the terrible chaos about to pop off in there. Gapsu flashes a sadistic smile and arrogantly whispers for the barbarian to grab his helpers and beat it before he ends up humiliated. He keeps mocking, saying he doesn't care where the warrior popped up from, but before he can finish talking, Wolfgang lands a direct punch right to his face. The violent punch throws Gapsu flying straight into the conference room wall and floor, destroying the room structure with raw strength. The other S-rank hunters stand in total horror and shock, seeing their ally knocked out cold in such a brutal, embarrassing way. The manager and Yeren cover their faces in utter panic over the financial bill, noticing the barbarian actually held back a lot during the hit. The leaders look at Gapsu's knocked-out body on the broken floor, fearfully asking themselves if the barbarian really packs all that absurd power. Hyeon swallows hard, super surprised to witness how easily the giant warrior handled an S-rank hunter. Miyeon gets pretty impressed by the warrior's attitude and cracks a slight smile, convinced Wolfgang really is a true hunter. The giant hero lets them know he's going to train everyone in the conference room to make sure they can defend themselves and protect people from demons. Jung-yu just shows up super uncomfortable and suspicious of Wolfgang's words, asking in a hostile tone if he really plans to teach them. Ha Young-un steps in, saying he accepts his strength, but teaching is different, arrogantly asking who he thinks he is to talk like that. Manager Junhwan panics over all that room damage, asking himself if he should start prepping for the agency's bankruptcy. Wolfgang switches his playful face to a super serious look as he remembers the painful losses he suffered back in the day. He sadly remembers walking through the flames of his destroyed village, carrying the bodies of his allies without being able to save them. The barbarian explains he thought his own power would be enough to protect everyone, but the demons turned out way more cruel than he predicted. The warrior regretfully reveals it was because of that arrogance that he ended up failing to protect his own family and companions 1,000 years ago. Hee-yeon listens closely while the warrior firmly warns he refuses to sit back and let that happen all over again. Mi-yeon watches from a distance as the barbarian speaks, stating that no one on Earth should ever be forced to go through such terrible pain. Looking at the group of terrified hunters, Wolfgang promises with full conviction that he'll train every single one of them to make them legit strong. He guarantees they'll be powerful enough never to lose what they love to the demons, daring anyone who still has doubts to attack him right now. The barbarian flashes a daring smile and commands everyone to attack together to settle who's boss once and for all before starting the training. Hee-yeon recalls the rumors that this giant man was capable of knocking out S-rank hunters with the ease of a single punch. She also remembers he managed to heal a top hunter on the verge of death using impressive, mysterious, angelic healing magic. On top of all that, he wiped out a terrifying demon with just one crushing attack, pulling off feats that seemed completely impossible. The young Sun Guild leader finds those stories hard to buy, but watches closely as the other S-ranks take the dare and attack him. The hunters charge full force at the barbarian in the testing room, throwing fast strikes that set off heavy gusts of wind and flames. Wolfgang dodges masterfully and teaches them, saying true physical strength must always come with movement, flexibility. Master Young-eun pops up from behind and manages to grab the giant warrior's waist, screaming, hyped that he finally pinned him. The barbarian glances back at his opponent calmly. Showing zero concern over the hunter's pin attempt, Young-eun uses his earth magic to trap the giant inside a massive rock. Surprised to feel Wolfgang's absurd weight and physical durability, Wolfgang snaps the rock easily with his foot and steps on his opponent's shoulder, warning that, besides flexibility, you need to know how to stand firm at the right time. With a single casual punch, the barbarian throws the warrior far back, causing him to crash hard right into his own allies. The top hunters drop piled up on the association training arena floor, completely beaten by the giant's absurd strength. Hee-yeon watches the whole thing in a cold sweat, shocked to see he dominated multiple S-ranks at the same time without having to take a single step from his spot. The young guild leader looks at the giant hero's imposing back, asking herself terrified what kind of monster he really is. The shiny metal sign shows the embarrassing matchup is going down inside training room 1A of the Hunter Association. Wolfgang looks at the fallen group and asks mockingly if 5 top hunters together can't even make him take a single step. Young-eun and Yuja try to get up exhausted and furious, cursing, unable to grasp how this guy keeps taking 0 damage from their attacks. Annoyed by the failure, Jong Yuja gathers a massive amount of golden magic energy, warning she won't tolerate that embarrassment anymore. Mi-yeon and Hee-yeon feel the heavy magic pressure starting to build up in the training room and look surprised at the top hunter Yuja casts the powerful meteor shower magic, summoning dozens of giant fire orbs to hit Wolfgang's spot directly. A massive fire blast destroys the whole training arena, throwing up a huge black smoke screen that frightens nearby hunters. Hee-yeon and manager Junwon watch the attack terrified, complaining that the hunter crossed the line using such destructive magic inside Yuja, catches her breath and panics, realizing she acted on impulse, fearing she killed the barbarian with the direct hit from her fire magic inside the smoke. Wolfgang calmly asks if that was all she had, leaving his opponents completely frozen in terror. Hee-yeon's eyes pop wide as she lets out a shock, gasp, noticing the giant warrior's voice stays solid with 0 signs of tiredness. Wolfgang walks out normally through the flames and smoke, proving he took the direct meteor hit without even moving from his spot. Manager Junhwan sighs, saying he doesn't even get surprised by this stuff anymore. Revealing the real danger starts now with the counterattack. Wolfgang raises his foot threateningly and warns with a terrifying look that now it's his turn to hit the top hunters. The barbarian charges, cracking the floor under his feet, setting off a devastating shockwave that makes the whole arena shake with power. He moves at insane speed, generating a wind gust so violent it sweeps the hunters away in a crushing wave. Yuja and the other warriors scream in terror as they get thrown through the air by the sheer pressure from the giant barbarian's push. Young-eun tries to shield himself from the windstorm and wreckage on the room floor, yelling terrified, not getting where that monstrous strength comes from. Hee-yeon also gets hit by the destructive wind wave and tries to hold on tight to avoid getting thrown into the arena walls. The impact of Wolfgang's energy completely wrecks the training room ceiling and walls, leaving deep cracks across the place. The dust settles, showing all the S-rank hunters beaten on the destroyed floor, while the giant stands tall in the center of the massive hole Junwan holds, his head panicked, predicting the sky-high repair bill the agency will have to pay for all that room damage. Wolfgang looks at his beaten opponents and casually asks if the questions about the training facilities have been cleared up. The hunters stay down out of breath on the broken ground, completely unable to answer or look at the barbarian after that show of strength. He comments that 5 of the country's strongest hunters didn't even last 5 minutes, saying they only know how to borrow power from deities. Wolfgang points his finger at the group, stating they're weak because they rely only on constellations and never actually trained their own bodies for real. Wolfgang puts his finger up and warns that during the first week of training, using the constellation powers they rely on is completely banned. Yongun protests, saying it's impossible to fight without constellation help. While Yuja silently asks if the barbarian is actually serious, Wolfgang explains that in the Underhell, the demon realm, nobody can use divine magic, meaning only their raw physical strength will matter. Yuja gets anxious, asking if they really need to go to the enemy lair, suggesting it would be less dangerous to just defend the surface like they do now. The barbarian turns around serious, reiterating he promised to help them develop real protection strength, both for their safety and the people around them. Hyun listens closely, while the warrior explains that waiting for monsters to come up to the surface is too late, as city destruction will already have gone down. He asserts with drive that the only way to end the threat is to drop down and hit first, wiping out all demons on their own turf. The Sun Guild Master stands with her back turned, deep in thought, reflecting on the harsh reality of the barbarian's words. Right after, Wolfgang talks in private with Hyun, letting her know she doesn't need to join the training or fight him. The dark-haired young woman turns around super confused by the pass, asking why he thinks she doesn't need training. The hero explains she's already hit her physical growth limit, expressing his real respect for her grind to reach that level on her own. He walks off slowly, adding that because of that, she won't get stronger by just doing regular training. Haeyeon grits her teeth frustrated, remembering the pain of losing her allies, thinking to herself that she won't watch anyone else die in front of her eyes ever again. She remembers her desperate promise in the Daejeon reign, set on finding a way to get stronger no matter what. Wolfgang declares that if they really want to protect people, they gotta focus on leveling up, warning everyone that heavy training kicks off tomorrow. The other S-rank hunters listen in total silence with serious looks. Finally accepting the barbarian's authority and lessons, Miyeon passes by, smiling past the Sun Guild Master, while Hyun keeps her locked, driven gaze on the giant warrior from the past in the hallway. Wolfgang says he's hungry and asks if he can eat meat, and the manager promises he'll pay for everything with the company card after all the hard work. The manager types happily on his phone, charging 100 million won per person for the lessons, stoked because the association will cover the room damage costs. The scene shifts over to the main building front of the Archaeology Hunter Association on a sunny day. Kang Yaren opens the door and steps into the room, saying she made it, finding her research colleagues locked in front of their computers. The researcher says she showed up right on time to check confidential data, asking if anything special went down at the emergency leader meeting. Yaren reveals Wolfgang knocked out an S-rank with a single punch, leaving the researcher shocked while the other guy says he expected something like that. She laughs, telling them the barbarian decided to set who was boss there, and thanks to his feats, they finally unlocked access to secret files. One of the female researchers' hands type fast on the computer keyboard. Hyped to access the newly unblocked data scientist, Sua, celebrates finding the info she was looking for, revealing there are records of petrified people all over the world. Yaren gets hyped, thinking others might have woken up like Wolfgang, but Sua explains all the rest turned to dust as soon as the spell broke. The scientist adjusts her glasses thoughtfully, asking herself why only Wolfgang made it through the process, intrigued about why his outcome was different. Her colleagues comment that Su-Ah went off into her own theory world, suggesting they keep researching other stuff, like info on the Underhell. Yaren takes over the keyboard and agrees to kick off research on the mysterious, dangerous demon realm underground. The screen displays that regular people die just getting close to the Underhell entrance, and even super strong hunters wouldn't last long down there. The document shows photos of potential entrances to the sub-hell, displaying pictures of monster creatures with glowing eyes inside dark caves. The research buddy points terrified at the monitor, asking to zoom in on a specific picture, claiming he's seen that place somewhere before. Yaren checks the screen up close with a surprised look, breaking into a cold sweat as she recognizes the mystery image pulled up by the system. She's shocked to notice the photo shows the exact surroundings of the old dark cave where they found Wolfgang's petrified body. The group of researchers realizes in total panic that the entrance to the dread Underhell was inside that very same cave the whole time.